Hello there, and welcome to Life Beyond Seen, a quiet corner where curiosity slows its pace, where science stretches its legs, and where the strange wonders of the natural world are explored gently enough that you might learn something new, just as your mind begins to drift towards sleep. Tonight's journey takes us somewhere unusually intimate in the ocean, not simply beneath the waves, not only down through the dim layers of salt water, where sunlight fades and the pressure slowly builds, but deeper still. We're going to explore creatures that live inside other creatures. Now that may sound slightly unsettling at first. The idea that an animal might make its home not in coral, or sand, or open water, but within the body of another living being can feel a little strange, perhaps even a bit uncomfortable. Yet in the ocean, and especially in the darker, quieter reaches of the deep sea, this kind of life is not rare at all. In fact, it is remarkably common. The ocean, as it turns out, is not just a world of fish and jellyfish and drifting plankton. It is also a world of hidden passengers, secret tenants, and tiny residents that spend their entire lives tucked away inside the bodies of other animals. Some of them are parasites, creatures that quietly draw energy from their hosts. Others are more like roommates, sharing space in ways that are surprisingly balanced. And a few relationships are so unusual that scientists are still trying to understand exactly how they work. But before we drift into those strange stories, I would love to ask you something simple. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And what time is it there right now? Maybe it's late evening and the day is winding down. Perhaps you're listening with the lights low, the room quiet except for the faint hum of a fan or the distant murmur of traffic outside. Or maybe you're somewhere entirely different. Early morning sunlight peeking through the curtains while the rest of the house is still asleep. Wherever you are, it's nice to imagine that we're all gathering here from different corners of the world, sharing this moment of curiosity about a place that very few of us will ever see in person. The deep ocean. If you find this kind of slow exploration relaxing, interesting, or simply a pleasant way to unwind, I'd be very grateful if you gave the video a like and perhaps subscribed as well. It helps this calm little channel reach others who might also enjoy a quiet wander through the hidden side of science. Now, let's begin our descent. When most people picture the ocean, they imagine open water filled with fish gliding through blue light, coral reefs bustling with colour, maybe a whale passing slowly through the distance. What we don't usually picture is the ocean within the ocean, because every fish, every crab, every drifting jellyfish is also its own small environment, a moving habitat, a warm, protected place where other forms of life can exist. To understand how common this is, it helps to think of animals not just as individual creatures, but as tiny ecosystems. Inside your own body, for example, trillions of microscopic organisms are already living quietly. Bacteria in your gut help digest food. Other microbes live on your skin. Many of them are harmless and some are actually helpful. Life inside life is not unusual. It's a pattern that appears again and again across the natural world. The ocean simply takes that idea and stretches it in remarkable ways. Out in the deep sea, where food can be scarce and shelter is hard to find, living inside another animal can actually be a very practical solution. Imagine drifting through a dark, cold environment where hiding places are limited and predators are everywhere. Finding a solid surface to cling to might already be difficult. Finding a warm, nutrient-rich environment that moves through the water on its own would be even better. A host animal can provide all of that. Protection from predators, a steady supply of food, a stable place to grow and reproduce. From the perspective of a tiny organism searching for survival, in the vastness of the ocean, moving inside another creature might be one of the safest decisions it can make. Of course, the host animal might not always agree with that arrangement. Some relationships are balanced, where both species benefit in subtle ways. Others are far less friendly. Certain parasites can take nutrients, alter behaviour, or even reshape the bodies of their hosts. Still, the story is rarely as simple as good or bad. Nature tends to operate in complicated shades of grey. and the deep sea is particularly good at producing complicated stories. Down there, sunlight disappears surprisingly quickly. By the time you reach about 200 meters below the surface, the bright blue world above has already faded into dim twilight. Dive deeper still, and darkness becomes nearly complete. In those shadowy layers, the ocean begins to feel very different. Temperatures drop, pressure rises, food becomes less predictable. For animals living in that environment, survival strategies can become unusual. Some species grow enormous mouths so they can swallow prey nearly their own size. Others produce glowing light to lure food closer. Some drift slowly through the water, conserving energy while waiting patiently for something edible to pass by. And then there are creatures that take an entirely different approach. Instead of searching endlessly for food and shelter in a vast empty ocean, they find a host. Once inside that host, life changes completely. Suddenly there is warmth, movement, a constant flow of nutrients. For certain organisms, it is the closest thing the deep sea offers to a comfortable home. You might be surprised by how many animals have evolved to live this way. Tiny worms can grow inside fish organs. Small crustaceans slip into gill chambers. Microscopic parasites travel through bloodstreams. Some creatures even take over parts of a host's body, replacing tissues or altering behavior in ways that seem almost unbelievable. One famous example, which we'll visit later, involves a parasite that attaches itself to a fish's tongue and eventually becomes the fish's new tongue. Yes, really. The original tongue withers away, and the parasite simply takes its place, sitting there quietly while the fish continues to eat as if nothing unusual has happened. If that sounds like something out of science fiction, you're not alone. Marine biologists had a similar reaction when they first began documenting cases like this. But once you start looking closely at the ocean, especially the deep ocean, you begin to notice that life is filled with partnerships that are far stranger than we once imagined. Many deep-sea animals are not truly alone. Inside them, around them, and sometimes even replacing parts of them, other organisms are living their own quiet lives. In some cases, hosts become entire neighborhoods. A single sea cucumber drifting slowly across the seafloor might contain small fish hiding inside its body cavity. Tiny worms might be burrowing through its tissues. Microorganisms could be digesting bits of food within its digestive tract. From the outside, you see one animal. Inside, there may be dozens of different forms of life interacting in complex ways. This idea can feel a little unsettling at first, mostly because humans are not used to thinking of ourselves as ecosystems. Yet biologically speaking, we are. Every animal is. Life tends to stack itself in layers. Large creatures provide space for smaller ones. Those smaller ones support even tinier organisms. The result is a web of relationships that extends far beyond what we can easily see. And in the deep ocean, where darkness hides most details from casual observation, those hidden relationships flourish. Many of them remained unknown for centuries simply because humans rarely encountered them. The deep sea itself was once considered nearly lifeless. Early ocean explorers assumed that extreme pressure and darkness would make survival nearly impossible. It wasn't until the late 19th and early 20th centuries that scientists began discovering just how vibrant deep-sea ecosystems could be. Strange fish with enormous eyes, delicate creatures that glow softly in the dark, giant squid drifting through cold water far below the reach of sunlight. And tucked within many of those animals were even smaller mysteries. Parasites, symbiotic partners, tiny hitchhikers. Sometimes scientists would examine a specimen only to discover another organism living inside it, then another, and sometimes another still. It was like opening a set of nesting dolls, each layer revealing something unexpected. As research methods improved, particularly with the development of deep-sea submersibles and remotely operated vehicles, scientists began observing living hosts in their natural environments, rather than only studying preserved samples. That changed everything. Suddenly, researchers could watch how these internal residents interacted with their hosts in real time. Some were harmless passengers, Others were subtle manipulators. A few seemed to control their hosts in ways that were almost eerie. Yet despite how dramatic some of these stories may sound, most of these relationships are simply part of the quiet routine of ocean life. For the host animal, carrying a few passengers may be no more unusual than birds resting briefly on the back of a whale. For the smaller organisms, it is simply home, and that idea that one creature can become the living environment for another opens the door to some of the most unusual life strategies on Earth. In the coming explorations, we'll meet worms that quietly inhabit fish tissues, crustaceans that hide inside gills, fish that shelter within sea cucumbers, and parasites that rewrite the rules of anatomy in surprising ways. We'll also discover that not every relationship is harmful. Some of these internal residents provide benefits to their hosts. They may clean parasites, help process food, or offer protection against other invaders. Life, even in the deep ocean, rarely operates with simple rules. Instead, it forms partnerships, compromises, and strange arrangements that allow multiple species to survive together in places that might otherwise seem impossibly harsh. And as we continue drifting a little deeper into this hidden world, one of the first questions that naturally appears is surprisingly basic. What exactly counts as a parasite? And how do scientists distinguish between an unwelcome intruder and a helpful guest? Because in the ocean, those distinctions are not always as clear as we might expect. If you imagine the ocean from above, perhaps standing on a quiet shoreline or watching waves move slowly beneath a pale evening sky, it often feels like a single vast world, a continuous body of water stretching across the planet, filled with currents, tides, and the distant movements of marine life. From that perspective, the ocean appears simple, enormous, yes, deep and mysterious, certainly, but still just one environment. Yet the deeper scientists look, the more they realize that the ocean is not one world at all. It is many worlds layered together, warm surface waters drifting above colder depths, vast plains of seafloor broken by mountains and trenches, invisible rivers of current carrying nutrients across entire basins, and within those layers exists another kind of ocean entirely, an ocean within the ocean, not made of water, but of living bodies. Every fish, every crustacean, every drifting jellyfish is not only a creature moving through the sea, it is also a small habitat, a moving landscape where other forms of life can exist. Inside those animals are spaces where tiny organisms feed, grow, reproduce, and sometimes spend their entire lives. The ocean outside may feel immense and open, but for many species the most reliable environment they will ever know is the interior of another creature. This idea might sound unusual at first, but in biology it is remarkably common. Living things rarely exist in isolation. Instead, they form networks of relationships where one organism becomes the environment for another. Even on land, this pattern appears everywhere. Trees host moss, fungi, insects, and birds. Mammals carry communities of bacteria inside their digestive systems. Coral reefs are built from tiny polyps that themselves contain microscopic algae living inside their tissues. Life supports life. And in the ocean, where water allows organisms to move freely through vast spaces, those relationships often become even more complex. Marine animals encounter each other constantly. Tiny larvae drift through the water until they find a host. Microscopic parasites travel between species through feeding or simple contact. The result is that many ocean creatures are not solitary individuals at all. They are collections of multiple organisms sharing space in ways that can be surprisingly intricate. Consider a typical fish swimming quietly through mid-water. From the outside, it looks like a single animal, a streamlined body gliding through dark water with steady movements of its fins. But inside that fish, a whole collection of life may already be present. Bacteria line the digestive tract, helping break down food that the fish cannot process alone. Tiny parasites may cling to the gills, feeding on blood or tissue. Worm-like organisms could be living quietly within the muscles or organs. Some of these passengers arrived when the fish was very young. Others entered later through food or contact with other animals. The fish itself continues swimming, feeding and reproducing, often with little sign that anything unusual is happening. In many cases, the relationship is so stable that both host and passenger have evolved together for millions of years. The ocean, in other words, contains layers of life that are almost invisible unless someone knows where to look. Marine biologists sometimes describe this concept using the idea of nested ecosystems. Large habitats contain smaller habitats. Those smaller habitats contain even smaller ones. A coral reef houses fish and crustaceans. Those fish host parasites and bacteria. Those bacteria may contain viruses that interact with them in ways scientists are still learning to understand. Each layer supports another. If you zoom in far enough, the ocean begins to resemble a set of biological neighbourhoods stacked within one another. At the larger scale, there is the open sea. Within it are communities of animals drifting or swimming together. Within each of those animals are smaller communities of organisms, and sometimes, within those organisms, there are even smaller passengers still. It is a bit like discovering that every house in a city contains its own tiny city. For many creatures, living inside a host offers advantages that the open ocean cannot easily provide. The first advantage is protection. The deep ocean can be a dangerous place. Predators move silently through the darkness. Food appears unpredictably. Safe hiding places are limited. Inside a host, however, an organism may find shelter from most external threats. A parasite living in the bloodstream of a fish does not need to worry about passing predators. A worm tucked within the digestive tract of a larger animal is shielded from the cold currents outside. The host becomes both transportation and shelter at the same time. Another advantage is stability. The ocean environment changes constantly. Temperatures fluctuate, currents shift, food sources appear and disappear. Inside another organism, conditions are often far more consistent. Body temperature remains stable. Nutrients flow regularly through blood or digestive fluids. Oxygen and chemical energy are constantly circulating through tissues. For a tiny organism, this stability can make survival far easier. Instead of searching endlessly through dark water for the next meal, the parasite or symbiotic partner may simply absorb nutrients directly from its surroundings. Some species have evolved bodies that barely resemble traditional animals at all. They lose organs they no longer need because their host provides everything required for survival. Eyes may disappear because darkness makes them useless. Complex digestive systems may shrink because food is already broken down by the host. Over long periods of evolution, these internal residents become specialised for one particular environment, not the ocean, but the interior of another living creature. It is a world defined by tissue walls instead of coral reefs, by blood flow instead of currents. And once a species adapts to that environment, returning to life outside the host may become impossible. The ocean within the ocean becomes its permanent home. Some of the most extreme examples of this lifestyle involve parasites that spend almost their entire existence inside hosts. They may hatch as microscopic larvae drifting through the sea. At some point they encounter the right animal, enter its body, and begin transforming. As they grow, their anatomy shifts to match their unusual environment. Certain parasitic worms become long and thread-like, allowing them to move through tissues. Others develop hooks or suction structures to anchor themselves firmly inside organs. Crustaceans that once resembled tiny shrimp may transform into strange sacs attached to their host's body. In some cases, the adult form of the parasite barely resembles the free-living ancestor from which it evolved. The environment inside the host has reshaped the creature completely. But parasites are only part of the story. Not every organism living within another animal is harmful. Some relationships fall into a category known as symbiosis, where both organisms benefit from sharing space. For example, certain bacteria living inside marine animals help digest difficult food sources. A host that feeds on tough plant material or complex organic compounds may rely on these microbial partners to break those substances down into usable nutrients. Without the bacteria, digestion would be inefficient. Without the host, the bacteria would not have a stable place to live. Both sides gain something valuable. In other cases, small animals take shelter inside larger ones without causing significant harm. Tiny fish may hide inside the body cavities of sea cucumbers, using them as mobile shelters that drift across the sea floor. The host continues feeding and moving normally, while the small fish gains protection from predators. The relationship may not provide a clear benefit to the host, but it does not create serious harm either. Nature often allows these kinds of quiet compromises. What matters most is balance. If the internal resident harms the host too severely, the host may die. If the host dies too quickly, the parasite loses its home. Evolution tends to push these relationships toward a middle ground, where both organisms can survive long enough to reproduce. The result is a remarkable range of biological strategies. Some parasites live gently enough that their hosts barely notice them. Others manipulate their hosts in ways that influence behavior or growth. A few relationships are so complex that scientists are still unraveling how they evolved. One particularly fascinating aspect of this hidden ocean is how many hosts can carry multiple species at once. A single deep-sea fish might host worms in its digestive system, crustaceans in its gills, bacteria in its gut, and microscopic parasites in its blood. Each organism occupies a different niche within the same body. Just as animals in a forest divide space between canopy, understory, and forest floor, internal residents divide the host's anatomy into separate living zones. Some specialize in gill tissues where oxygen is plentiful. Others prefer the nutrient-rich environment of the intestines. Some move through the bloodstream, traveling wherever circulation carries them. The host becomes a miniature landscape with different habitats inside. This layered structure explains why marine biologists sometimes refer to animals as superorganisms. An individual creature is not simply one species. It is a collection of interacting life forms living together. Understanding this concept has changed how scientists study marine ecosystems. Instead of focusing only on visible animals, researchers now examine the communities of organisms living within them. Modern tools such as genetic sequencing allow scientists to identify microscopic residents that would have been impossible to detect a few decades ago. Each new discovery adds another layer to our understanding of the ocean's complexity. Sometimes researchers find parasites that appear to exist in only one host species. In other cases, they discover organisms capable of moving between several hosts during different stages of life. A tiny larva drifting through plankton may enter a small fish first, grow partially, then transfer into a larger predator that eats that fish. Life cycles can involve 2, 3, or even more different hosts before reaching adulthood. The ocean within the ocean is not static. It is constantly changing as organisms move between bodies, reproduce, and evolve alongside their hosts. And once you begin noticing these patterns, it becomes clear that hosts are far more than individual animals. They are living environments supporting entire communities. A drifting jellyfish might carry small fish hiding among its tentacles, while microscopic parasites travel through its tissues. A whale moving slowly through deep water hosts countless microorganisms across its skin and inside its digestive system. Even creatures that appear isolated are rarely alone. Their bodies are worlds. As we continue exploring these hidden worlds, one of the first important questions that naturally appears is how scientists categorize the different relationships that occur inside hosts. Because not every internal resident behaves the same way. Some are harmful invaders, some are harmless passengers, others are beneficial partners. Understanding those differences helps explain why the ocean is filled with creatures that make their homes inside others, and it also reveals how evolution has produced an astonishing variety of strategies for sharing space in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. The next step in understanding this hidden ocean is learning how scientists describe these relationships and why the line between guest and intruder is not always as clear as it might seem. When scientists talk about creatures living inside other creatures, they usually begin with a set of words that help describe the relationship between them. These words are useful because not every internal resident behaves the same way, and the differences can be surprisingly important. Some organisms quietly share space with their hosts and cause very little trouble. Others take resources from the host without offering anything in return. A few go even further, manipulating the host's body or behaviour in ways that seem almost unsettling. To understand this hidden world, biologists often group these relationships into a few broad categories. The first and perhaps most familiar term is parasite. A parasite is an organism that lives in or on another organism, called the host, and gains nutrients or shelter at the host's expense. In simple terms, the parasite benefits while the host pays some kind of biological cost. That cost might be small. In some cases, the host barely notices the parasite's presence, but sometimes the effects can be dramatic, affecting growth, health, reproduction, or even behaviour. Parasites exist throughout the natural world. They live in forests, deserts, rivers, and of course, the ocean. What makes marine parasites especially fascinating is the sheer diversity of ways they have adapted to life inside their hosts. Some are microscopic, invisible without powerful magnification. Others are large enough to be seen easily once the host is opened and examined. Certain parasites remain attached to the outer surface of a host, clinging to skin or gills. These are called ectoparasites. Others live entirely inside the host's body, feeding on tissues, blood, or partially digested food. Those are known as endoparasites. The ocean is full of both types. A small crustacean might latch onto a fish's gills and slowly draw nourishment from its blood. Meanwhile, tiny worms might live inside the fish's digestive system, absorbing nutrients from food passing through. To the host, these internal residents are often little more than an inconvenience, but to the parasite, the host represents a stable and reliable environment. In many cases, parasites have evolved remarkable ways to ensure they stay inside that environment. Hooks, barbs, suction structures, and specialized mouthparts allow them to anchor themselves securely within tissues or organs. Some produce chemicals that help them avoid detection by the host's immune system. Over time, these adaptations can become extremely specialized. A parasite that lives in fish gills, for example, may evolve structures perfectly suited to gripping delicate gill filaments. If that parasite were removed and placed anywhere else, it might not survive long. Its entire anatomy has become tailored to that very specific environment. Yet parasites are only one part of the story. Another category of internal residents includes organisms that live with a host but do not necessarily harm it. These are often described as commensals. In a commensal relationship, one organism benefits from living with another, while the host experiences little or no noticeable effect. It is a bit like sharing a house with a quiet roommate who never causes trouble and rarely interacts with you. Many small marine animals live this way. Tiny fish may hide inside the bodies of sea cucumbers. Small crustaceans may take shelter within the gill chambers of larger animals. These residents gain protection from predators and access to food particles drifting through the host's body. The host, meanwhile, carries on its normal life without much interference. Because the host is neither significantly helped nor harmed, scientists place these relationships in the category of commensalism. Then there is a third possibility. Sometimes the relationship benefits both the host and the resident organism. This is known as mutualism. In mutualistic relationships, both partners gain something valuable from sharing space. Certain bacteria living inside marine animals help digest complex food materials. In return, the host provides the bacteria with a stable environment and a constant supply of nutrients. Some small crustaceans living on or within fish help remove harmful parasites or dead tissue. The crustacean receives food while the host receives cleaning services. Mutualism can become so important that the host eventually depends on the partner organism for survival. Without the internal residents performing their helpful tasks, the host may struggle to digest food or defend against infections. What makes these categories interesting is that they are not always as rigid as they might sound. A relationship that appears harmless under one set of conditions may become harmful under another. A commensal organism might become parasitic if its population grows too large. A mutualistic partner might shift toward parasitism if environmental conditions change. Nature tends to resist neat definitions. Relationships between species often exist along a spectrum rather than fitting perfectly into one box. The deep ocean provides many examples of this complexity. Take a fish carrying small worms inside its digestive tract. If the worms absorb only a tiny portion of the nutrients passing through, the host may experience little harm. In that case, the relationship might resemble commensalism. But if the worm population grows large enough to block digestion or damage tissue, the relationship shifts toward parasitism. The difference lies in how much the host is affected. Marine biologists sometimes refer to these internal residents using more informal descriptions. Parasites may be thought of as uninvited tenants. They arrive without permission and begin using resources that belong to the host. Commensal organisms are more like quiet guests. They benefit from the host's presence but rarely interfere with its daily activities. Mutualistic partners are closer to cooperative housemates, each providing something useful to the other. Of course, the host itself rarely has any say in these arrangements. Hosts do not sign agreements or negotiate terms. The relationships emerge through long periods of evolution, where species adapt to each other's presence. Over many generations, hosts may develop defenses against harmful parasites. Parasites in turn evolve strategies to overcome those defenses. The result is an ongoing biological conversation between host and resident. This evolutionary back and forth can produce some astonishing adaptations. For example, many parasites have evolved the ability to detect the chemical signals of their hosts while drifting through the ocean as larvae. Imagine a microscopic organism floating through dark water. It may encounter hundreds of different animals during its brief journey, yet somehow it must identify the correct host species. Scientists believe these larvae often recognize specific chemical cues released by their preferred hosts. Once detected, the parasite attaches and begins the next stage of its life cycle. In some cases, parasites even alter their host's behavior to improve their chances of survival. Certain marine parasites make infected animals more likely to be eaten by predators. At first this might seem counterproductive, after all the host dies, but if the parasite's next life stage requires living inside that predator, the host's death becomes a necessary step. The parasite moves up the food chain. These life cycles can involve multiple hosts at different stages. A tiny parasite might begin inside a small crustacean. When a fish eats that crustacean, the parasite moves into the fish's body and continues growing. Later, when a larger predator eats the fish, the parasite reaches its final host and reproduces. Each host becomes a temporary habitat along the parasite's journey. It is an elaborate strategy shaped by millions of years of evolution. The ocean is particularly well suited to these complex life cycles because so many species interact through feeding. Fish eat smaller fish. Squid hunt crustaceans. Large predators consume almost anything they can catch. Parasites take advantage of these interactions to move from one host to another. Yet despite how dramatic some of these examples sound, the majority of parasitic relationships remain subtle. Most parasites do not want to kill their host quickly. Doing so would eliminate their own shelter and food supply. Instead, they tend to draw small amounts of nutrients while allowing the host to continue living. Over time, hosts and parasites may reach a kind of uneasy balance. The host's immune system keeps the parasite population under control. The parasites evolve ways to remain hidden or minimize damage. Neither side wins completely, but both continue existing. This balance explains why parasites are so widespread. They are not simply biological accidents. They are successful strategies that have allowed countless species to survive. In fact, some scientists estimate that parasites may represent a significant portion of all life on Earth. For every visible animal in the ocean, there may be several smaller organisms living inside or upon it. The ocean within the ocean is filled with these hidden tenants. Yet the relationships between hosts and their internal residents are not always one-sided struggles. Sometimes they become so integrated that separating the two species would be impossible. Certain marine animals depend entirely on the organisms living inside them. Without those partners, they could not digest food, process nutrients, or defend themselves from disease. In those cases, the internal residents are no longer parasites or guests, they're essential partners, and this complexity leads to another interesting observation about the ocean. Many animals are not just individual creatures moving through water, they are communities. A host animal provides space and resources that support multiple species at once. Parasites, commensals, mutualists, and microscopic organisms may all exist together inside the same body. Each species occupies its own niche within the host's internal landscape. Some live in the digestive system, others in the bloodstream, muscles, or gills. Just as forests contain birds, insects, fungi, and mammals living side by side, hosts contain layered communities of organisms interacting in subtle ways. The ocean within the ocean grows richer the closer we look. And as we continue exploring these relationships, it becomes clear that hosts themselves often function as entire ecosystems. Large animals drifting through the deep sea may carry with them a collection of hidden residents, each playing a role in a complex internal environment. Understanding those environments helps scientists see marine life in a new way. Instead of focusing only on individual species, they begin to study the communities living inside them. And in many cases, those communities reveal just how interconnected life in the ocean truly is. Because once you begin examining hosts as habitats, another surprising pattern emerges. Some animals become so important to internal residents that their bodies support entire biological neighbourhoods, filled with multiple species living together inside a single host. If you were able to drift quietly through the deep ocean far below the reach of sunlight, you might expect the environment to feel empty. The water grows colder as you descend. Light fades until it disappears completely. The vastness of the ocean becomes more apparent the deeper you go. Miles of open water stretch in every direction, broken only occasionally by the slow movement of a passing fish or the faint glow of a bioluminescent organism. At first glance, it might seem like a lonely place. But that impression can be misleading. The deep sea is not empty, it is simply subtle. Much of the activity there happens on scales that are easy to miss unless you know what to look for. And one of the most surprising discoveries scientists have made about the deep ocean is that many of its inhabitants are not just individual animals moving through the water, they are entire habitats. A fish drifting through dark water may appear solitary, yet within its body and across its surface are smaller organisms living their own lives. A crab crawling across the seafloor might carry microscopic residents in its gills and digestive system. A jellyfish floating slowly upward may host tiny passengers nestled among its tissues. Each host animal becomes a world made of hosts. This idea can feel a little strange at first because humans are used to thinking of animals as single, self-contained beings. When we see a fish or a squid or a sea cucumber, we imagine one organism performing its own actions. But biology rarely works that way. In reality, living creatures often support entire communities of other organisms. These communities can include parasites drawing nutrients from tissues, commensal organisms seeking shelter, and mutualistic partners helping with digestion or protection. Together they form layered ecosystems inside a single body. Imagine for a moment a large fish swimming slowly through the twilight zone of the ocean, perhaps 500 meters below the surface. From the outside, its life seems straightforward. It searches for food, avoids predators, and navigates the dark waters around it. Inside, however, things may be far more complicated. Tiny bacteria line its digestive tract, helping break down food. Worm-like parasites may occupy sections of the intestine. Small crustaceans could be hiding in the gill chambers, feeding on organic particles carried by the flow of water. Microscopic parasites may circulate through the bloodstream, completing stages of their life cycle before eventually moving to another host. To the fish, all of this activity is simply part of being alive. To the smaller organisms, the fish is a living landscape. Its organs become habitats, its tissues become food sources, its circulatory system becomes a transportation network carrying nutrients and oxygen throughout their world. The host moves through the ocean, but the community inside experiences a completely different environment. Instead of cold currents and vast open space, they live within warm tissues and flowing fluids. Their world is smaller, yet remarkably stable. For many organisms, this stability is exactly what makes living inside a host so appealing. The deep ocean can be unpredictable. Food appears sporadically. Temperatures fluctuate depending on depth and currents. Inside a host, those fluctuations are softened. Body temperature remains fairly constant. Nutrients flow steadily as the host feeds. Even oxygen levels are regulated by the host's own biological systems. From the perspective of a tiny organism, the interior of a large animal can feel like a protected refuge drifting through an otherwise challenging environment. That refuge also moves. Unlike a rock or coral reef, a host animal travels through the ocean. As it swims, crawls, or drifts, the internal community moves with it. The host becomes both habitat and vehicle at the same time. This mobility offers advantages that stationary habitats cannot provide. If the host finds food, internal residents gain access to nutrients. If the host migrates to a new region, the community travels there as well. In this way, hosts allow smaller organisms to explore environments they could never reach on their own. Over long periods of evolution, some organisms have become so specialized for this lifestyle that they cannot survive outside their hosts at all. Their bodies adapt to the interior environment. Eyes become unnecessary and may disappear entirely. Digestive systems shrink because nutrients can be absorbed directly through body surfaces. Limbs used for movement in open water may reduce or transform into structures that anchor the organism inside tissues. These changes can make internal residents look dramatically different from their free-living relatives. A parasitic worm, for example, may resemble a simple thread-like strand rather than a complex animal, yet its anatomy is perfectly suited to navigating the environment inside a host. The same principle applies to many other groups of organisms. Crustaceans that once resembled small shrimp may transform into flattened bodies that cling tightly to gills or skin. Certain parasitic species become little more than sacs filled with reproductive organs, relying entirely on their host for nutrients. From an evolutionary perspective, this transformation represents efficiency. Structures that are no longer needed disappear. Features that help the organism remain inside the host become more elaborate. The result is a creature perfectly adapted to its unusual home. Hosts, meanwhile, continue their lives in the open ocean. Many animals carry these internal communities with surprisingly little disruption. Their immune systems keep harmful organisms under control, preventing parasites from multiplying too rapidly. Some hosts develop thickened tissues or protective chemicals that limit damage from internal residents. Over time, hosts and their internal communities settle into a delicate balance. The host remains healthy enough to survive and reproduce. The internal residents obtain the resources they need without destroying their environment. When this balance holds, the system can persist for generations. In some cases, hosts become such reliable habitats that entire species depend on them for survival. Sea cucumbers drifting across the seafloor provide shelter for small fish that hide inside their body cavities. Large whales carry communities of microorganisms on their skin and inside their digestive systems. Deep-sea fish may host parasites that spend their entire adult lives inside one specific species. These relationships can become so specialized that a parasite found in one host species might never appear in any other. If that host disappears from the ecosystem, the parasite may disappear as well. This dependency illustrates just how closely connected these organisms become. The host is no longer simply an animal moving through the ocean. It is an ecosystem supporting other species, and sometimes those ecosystems grow quite crowded. Marine biologists studying deep-sea hosts occasionally discover multiple parasites and commensal organisms living inside a single animal. A fish might carry several species of worms in its digestive tract, along with crustaceans in its gills and microscopic parasites in its blood. Each organism occupies a different niche within the host's body. The digestive tract becomes one habitat, the gills another. Muscle tissue and circulatory systems form additional environments. Much like animals in a forest divide space between trees, undergrowth and soil, internal residents divide the host's anatomy into zones suited to their needs. This division reduces competition and allows multiple species to coexist within the same host. Hosts, in this sense, resemble miniature landscapes. Tissues provide shelter. Nutrients circulate through fluids. Boundaries between organs act like natural barriers separating different communities. The ocean outside may stretch for thousands of kilometers, but inside a host, life organizes itself within a few centimeters of biological terrain. Understanding hosts as ecosystems has changed how scientists study marine life. Early marine biology focused primarily on visible animals. Researchers examined fish, crustaceans and mollusks as individual species interacting with their environment. As scientific tools improved, researchers began noticing the organisms living inside those animals. Microscopes revealed bacteria and parasites that had gone unnoticed before. Genetic analysis uncovered microbial communities that were impossible to identify through traditional observation. Suddenly, animals that once appeared simple turned out to be complex biological communities. A single host might contain hundreds or even thousands of microbial species, each playing a role in digestion, immunity, or nutrient processing. The host itself became part of a larger biological network. This perspective continues to shape modern research. Scientists studying marine ecosystems now consider not only the visible animals, but also the hidden organisms living inside them. These internal residents influence host health, reproduction, and behavior. In some cases, they affect entire food webs. Parasites moving between hosts through predation can connect species that might otherwise appear unrelated. A small crustacean infected with a parasite may be eaten by a fish. The parasite transfers to the fish and continues developing. Later, a larger predator consumes the fish, allowing the parasite to reach its final host. Each step links multiple species together through the parasite's life cycle. The host, therefore, is not simply an isolated individual. It is a node within a much larger network of biological relationships. This network extends across the ocean, connecting organisms through feeding, reproduction, and the quiet exchange of internal residents. As we begin to recognize these connections, the ocean starts to look less like a collection of separate animals and more like an interconnected system of living environments. Hosts support parasites. Parasites move between hosts. Microorganisms assist digestion and influence immune responses. Every layer of life interacts with another. And when scientists examine deep-sea animals closely, they often discover that what appears to be a single organism is actually home to a hidden neighborhood of smaller creatures. Some are helpful partners, others are opportunistic tenants. A few are invaders drawing resources from their hosts. Together they form the communities that make the ocean within the ocean possible. Once this perspective settles in, it becomes easier to understand why so many organisms have evolved to live inside hosts. The deep sea can be unpredictable, but hosts offer stability. Food flows through digestive systems. Blood carries nutrients throughout the body. Tissues provide protection from the harsh conditions outside. For organisms searching for survival strategies in dark water, the body of another animal can be one of the most reliable habitats available. And in many cases, the first creatures to take advantage of this opportunity are so small that they pass unnoticed by the host themselves. They begin as microscopic invaders, drifting through the ocean until they encounter the right animal. Once inside, they begin transforming the host into a new environment for life. When scientists study the creatures that live inside other animals, they often discover that the story begins at a scale so small it is easy to overlook. Before worms coil through organs, before crustaceans hide in gills, before parasites attach themselves to tongues or tissues, there are usually much smaller pioneers that arrive first. Microscopic organisms. These first tiny invaders are often invisible to the naked eye, drifting through seawater as single cells or delicate larvae. Yet despite their size, they are among the most successful travellers in the ocean. They spread quietly through currents, slip into hosts unnoticed, and begin life cycles that can shape entire ecosystems. To understand how this happens, it helps to imagine the ocean not as empty water, but as a constantly moving cloud of microscopic life. Every litre of seawater contains millions of tiny organisms. Bacteria, protozoa, viruses, and microscopic larvae drift together in an invisible community known as plankton. Most of these organisms never grow large enough to be noticed. Some spend their entire lives floating through currents. Others exist only briefly before becoming food for larger animals. But a few follow a different path. Among the drifting plankton are larvae belonging to parasites and symbiotic species that depend on finding a host. These larvae may be extremely small, sometimes little more than a cluster of cells equipped with tiny structures that help them swim. Their mission is simple, though not necessarily easy. They must locate a suitable host somewhere in the vast ocean. This is no small challenge. Imagine being a microscopic organism in a body of water that covers most of the planet. Your host might be one particular species of fish, perhaps living hundreds of meters below the surface. Yet somehow you must find it. Over millions of years, evolution has produced clever solutions to this problem. Some larvae respond to chemical signals released by potential hosts. Fish, crustaceans, and other animals constantly release trace amounts of organic compounds into the water. These chemical trails can spread through currents like faint scents drifting across the sea. Certain microscopic parasites are able to detect these signals. When they sense the chemical signature of the right host species, they move toward it. Others rely on timing and probability rather than detection. They release enormous numbers of larvae into the water, increasing the chances that at least a few will encounter the correct host. Many parasites produce thousands, or even millions of offspring for this reason. Most of those larvae will never find a host, but a small fraction will succeed. Once contact occurs, the next stage begins. The larva must enter the host's body. Different organisms have evolved different strategies for doing this. Some penetrate soft tissues directly, others attach to gills, skin, or mouth parts before slowly working their way inward. Certain parasites rely on being eaten. Their larvae drift in the water until a small animal consumes them along with plankton. Once inside the digestive tract, the parasite begins developing within its new environment. In many cases, this is only the first step of a longer journey. Some parasites require several hosts during different stages of their life cycle. A larva may begin in a small crustacean, grow partially, and then move into a fish that eats that crustacean. Later, a larger predator consumes the fish, allowing the parasite to reach its final host where reproduction occurs. Each transition depends on the natural feeding habits of marine animals. Fish eat smaller organisms. Predators eat fish. Parasites quietly ride along this chain of consumption, transferring from host to host. For the parasite, the host becomes a temporary habitat along a carefully timed life cycle. But not all microscopic invaders follow such complicated paths. Some species settle into a single host early in life and remain there permanently. One common example involves parasitic worms that begin as tiny larvae drifting through plankton. When these larvae encounter a fish or marine mammal, they attach themselves to tissues and begin growing. Over time, they develop into larger forms capable of reproducing inside the host. To the host, the arrival of these early invaders may pass unnoticed. Many microscopic parasites are so small that they cause little immediate damage. They enter quietly, begin feeding gently, and grow slowly while the host continues its daily life. From the outside, nothing appears unusual. Inside, however, the host has become the beginning of an entirely new ecosystem. The process can be compared to the way seeds colonize land. Imagine a bare patch of soil. At first, there is nothing visible growing there. Then tiny seeds carried by wind or animals settle onto the ground. Some fail to sprout, others take root and begin growing. Eventually larger plants appear, followed by insects, fungi, and animals that depend on those plants. What started as an empty patch of earth becomes a small ecosystem. Inside a host animal, microscopic invaders perform a similar role. They are the first arrivals, establishing themselves in tissues or fluids where larger parasites may later appear. Many of these early colonizers are not even parasites in the traditional sense. Some are bacteria forming symbiotic relationships with the host. These microbes may assist with digestion, helping break down food that the host cannot process alone. Fish that feed on algae or complex plant material often rely on microbial partners living in their digestive systems. Without these bacteria, digestion would be inefficient. The host might struggle to obtain enough nutrients from its food. In return, the bacteria receive a stable environment and a constant supply of organic material. This partnership benefits both sides. Other microscopic organisms occupy neutral roles. They live quietly inside the host without causing noticeable harm or providing obvious benefits. Scientists sometimes refer to these organisms as commensals, because they share space with the host but do not significantly influence its health. Yet even these quiet residents can play subtle roles in the internal ecosystem. They compete with harmful parasites for space and resources. Their presence may help stabilize the host's internal environment, preventing more dangerous organisms from taking over. In this way, the earliest microscopic colonizers can influence which species are able to establish themselves later. If beneficial bacteria dominate the host's digestive system, harmful parasites may struggle to gain a foothold. If the host's immune defenses weaken, opportunistic parasites may suddenly flourish. The internal environment of a host is constantly changing, and the smallest invaders are often the first to shape it. Some of the most intriguing microscopic parasites belong to groups known as protozoans. These single-celled organisms can infect fish, crustaceans, and marine mammals. Despite having only one cell, they possess surprisingly complex behaviors. Certain protozoans invade blood cells, multiplying rapidly until the cells burst. Others settle in tissues where they slowly reproduce over time. Because they are so small, these infections may go unnoticed until the parasite population becomes large enough to affect the host's health. In aquaculture environments, where fish are kept in close proximity, protozoan parasites can spread quickly from one host to another. In the open ocean, however, infections tend to remain balanced by the natural defences of hosts and the dispersal of parasites through large volumes of water. This balance highlights an important point about microscopic invaders. Not all parasites are harmful all the time. Many exist in low numbers without causing serious damage. Problems arise only when conditions allow them to multiply too quickly. Changes in water temperature, pollution, or host stress can shift this balance. When that happens, the tiny invaders that once lived quietly inside their hosts may suddenly become dangerous. But under natural conditions, most microscopic residents remain part of a stable internal community. They form the foundation of the ocean within the ocean, and as hosts grow larger and live longer, these internal communities often expand. Larger parasites may arrive later in the host's life. Worms, crustaceans, and other organisms join the microscopic pioneers already living inside. The host becomes increasingly complex. What began as a single fish drifting through the ocean now supports layers of life within its body. Each layer interacts with the others. Bacteria influence digestion. Parasites draw nutrients. Commensal organisms share space without conflict. Together they form an internal ecosystem that evolves alongside the host itself. Scientists studying marine biology often compare this process to the development of a city. The first settlers arrive quietly, establishing small communities. Over time, more residents move in, infrastructure develops, neighbourhoods expand and diversify. Eventually, the city becomes a bustling network of different groups living together. Inside many ocean animals, a similar process unfolds on a biological scale. Microscopic invaders arrive first. They prepare the environment for larger organisms that may follow. And while these early colonizers are tiny beyond imagination, their presence shapes the hidden ecosystems that flourish within marine hosts. As researchers continue exploring these internal worlds, they often discover that the next stage of this story involves organisms that are no longer microscopic. Some grow large enough to twist through organs and tissues, turning the host body into a complex habitat. Among the most remarkable of these residents are parasitic worms, creatures that have transformed the interior of fish and other marine animals into their permanent homes. When people think about worms, they often imagine something simple. A small creature in soil after rain, perhaps wriggling slowly across a garden path. Something soft, quiet, and not particularly complicated. But in the ocean, worms have taken on roles that are far more unusual. Some of them do not live in sand or mud at all. Instead, they spend their lives inside other animals, transforming the bodies of fish and marine creatures into entire living habitats. To these worms, a fish is not simply another animal swimming through the water, it is a home, and in many cases it becomes a home that lasts an entire lifetime. The ocean contains thousands of species of parasitic worms, many of which specialize in living inside fish. These worms belong to several different groups, including nematodes, cestodes, and trematodes. Each group has evolved its own strategies for entering hosts, surviving inside them, and eventually reproducing. At first glance, the idea might sound unpleasant, yet from a biological perspective it is remarkably efficient. The deep ocean can be a difficult place to survive. Food appears unpredictably, temperatures can be low, and predators are always present. Inside a fish, however, the situation is very different. There is warmth compared to the surrounding water. Nutrients flow regularly as the fish eats and digests food. The host moves through the ocean, carrying the parasite with it. For a worm that has evolved to live inside a host, these conditions can be ideal. Many parasitic worms begin their lives as microscopic larvae, drifting through the ocean's plankton. At this stage, they are extremely small, almost invisible even to trained observers. They float through currents alongside countless other microscopic organisms. Some larvae are eventually eaten by small crustaceans or plankton-feeding fish. Others may attach directly to the gills or skin of a host. Once inside, the worm begins to grow. Its body lengthens, developing specialized structures that help it remain anchored within the host. Some worms possess tiny hooks or barbs that grip tissues securely. Others rely on suction-like mouthparts that allow them to attach to the lining of the digestive tract. The location where a worm settles depends on its species. Certain worms live in the stomach or intestines, absorbing nutrients from partially digested food. Others move into muscle tissue, forming coiled structures within the flesh of fish. Some species inhabit the body cavity surrounding internal organs, drifting quietly in the fluid-filled space between tissues. From the host perspective, these internal residents may go largely unnoticed. Fish often carry small numbers of parasitic worms without showing obvious signs of illness. Their immune systems keep the parasites from multiplying too quickly, maintaining a balance between host and invader. But the worms themselves are far from passive. They continue growing, sometimes reaching several centimeters in length. Inside the digestive system of a fish, a worm may anchor itself firmly to the intestinal wall. Its body extends freely into the flowing stream of nutrients passing through the gut. In this position, the worm can absorb food directly through its surface. Unlike many animals, certain parasitic worms have no digestive system of their own. They simply absorb nutrients across their outer tissues. The host does the work of eating and breaking down food. The worm collects what it needs from the surrounding environment. This arrangement allows the parasite to survive with minimal anatomical complexity. Evolution gradually removes structures that are no longer necessary. If the host provides digested nutrients, the worm does not need a stomach or intestines. Over generations, the parasite becomes streamlined for life inside its host. Its body may consist largely of reproductive organs, ensuring that once it reaches maturity it can produce enormous numbers of eggs. Those eggs eventually leave the host, often through waste released into the surrounding water. Once outside, the eggs hatch into microscopic larvae, and the cycle begins again. Sometimes, however, the worm's life cycle involves more than one host. In these cases, the fish carrying the worm may not be the final destination. A small fish infected with worm larvae might swim through the ocean for months or even years. During that time, the parasite grows slowly within its tissues. Then one day a larger predator eats the fish. For the host, this moment marks the end of its life. For the parasite, it represents a critical transition. Inside the predator's digestive system, the worm reaches its final stage of development. There it matures, reproduces and releases eggs into the ocean through the predator's waste. The entire life cycle depends on the natural feeding behaviour of marine animals. Fish eat smaller fish. Predators eat fish. Parasites quietly ride along through the food chain. Some parasitic worms are so well adapted to this process that they actually benefit when their host becomes easier prey. Scientists studying certain parasites have found evidence suggesting that infected fish may behave slightly differently from healthy ones. They may swim closer to the surface or react more slowly to predators. These subtle changes increase the chances that the fish will be eaten by a larger animal. From the parasite's perspective, this outcome is exactly what it needs. The worm does not deliberately control the fish in a conscious sense. Instead, its presence alters chemical signals or physical conditions inside the host body. These changes influence behaviour in small ways that ultimately benefit the parasite's life cycle. One of the most well-known groups of parasitic worms found in fish are nematodes. Nematodes, also known as roundworms, are incredibly widespread in marine environments. They appear in fish, marine mammals, and even seabirds that feed on infected fish. A familiar example involves the genus Anisakis. These worms begin life as microscopic larvae drifting through seawater. Small crustaceans ingest the larvae while feeding on plankton. Fish then eat the crustaceans, allowing the larvae to move into the fish's tissues. Inside the fish, the larvae coil themselves into tight spirals within the muscles or internal organs. They may remain in this dormant stage for extended periods. If a marine mammal, such as a whale or seal, eventually eats the fish, the larvae awaken and continue their development inside the mammal's digestive system. There they mature into adult worms capable of reproduction. This life cycle connects several different species across the ocean food web. Crustaceans, fish, and marine mammals all become part of the parasite's journey. Yet even within fish alone, parasitic worms can form complex communities. A single fish may carry multiple species of worms simultaneously. Some live in the stomach, others in the intestines, still others embedded in muscle tissue. Each species occupies its own niche within the host's body. Marine biologists studying infected fish often describe the experience as discovering an internal ecosystem. What appears to be one animal from the outside may contain a network of organisms interacting within it. And interestingly, the presence of these worms does not always mean the host is in immediate danger. Fish have coexisted with parasites for millions of years. Their immune systems are adapted to tolerate small numbers of internal residents. Only when parasite populations grow too large do serious health problems usually appear. This balance allows both host and parasite to survive. The fish continues swimming, feeding and reproducing. The worms obtain nutrients and eventually release eggs that continue the cycle. From an evolutionary perspective, this arrangement is remarkably stable. If a parasite kills its host too quickly, it loses the environment it depends on. If the host eliminates the parasite entirely, the parasite species may disappear. Over time, natural selection favours parasites that draw just enough resources to survive without destroying their host. The result is a delicate equilibrium. Yet not all parasitic worms remain quietly hidden inside organs. Some create visible effects that scientists and fishermen occasionally notice. Certain species cause cysts or small nodules to form in fish tissues. Others may coil within the flesh of fish fillers, appearing as thin white threads. While this may seem alarming, these worms are usually harmless when fish are properly cooked. They are simply another example of the complex relationships that exist between marine animals. And for the worms themselves, the fish is not merely a passing host. It is a carefully adapted living environment. The worm's body fits within the host's internal landscape. Nutrients arrive with every meal the fish consumes. The host's movements carry the parasite through the ocean. From the worm's perspective, the fish becomes an entire world. Yet worms are only one group of organisms that transform marine animals into living habitats. In other cases, the invaders are not slender parasites hidden deep inside tissues, but small crustaceans that attach to hosts in ways that can alter their bodies, and even their behaviour. Some of these creatures do far more than simply feed on their hosts. They hijack them. In the ocean, crabs are usually easy to recognise. They walk sideways across the seafloor, hide beneath rocks, or scuttle quickly through shallow water. Their bodies are compact, protected by hard shells, with strong claws that allow them to feed on a wide range of food. They look like independent animals, clearly in control of their own movements. Yet some crabs have taken a very different evolutionary path. Instead of walking across the ocean floor or hunting for prey, these unusual species spend their lives attached to other animals. And rather than simply feeding quietly like many parasites do, they sometimes take control of their hosts in ways that can dramatically alter how those hosts behave. These organisms belong to a group known as parasitic barnacles, and despite the name, they are actually crustaceans related to crabs. Their story begins with a creature that, at first glance, looks nothing like the parasite it will eventually become. As larvae, parasitic barnacles drift through the ocean as tiny planktonic forms. At this stage they resemble many other crustacean larvae, with delicate limbs used for swimming and feeding. They float through currents, part of the invisible cloud of microscopic life that fills the sea. Eventually one of these larvae encounters a crab. Not just any crab, but the correct species that it has evolved to infect. Once the larva finds its host, something remarkable happens. Instead of simply attaching to the surface of the crab's shell, the larva begins to transform. It sheds much of its original anatomy and injects a cluster of cells into the crab's body. These cells begin spreading inside the host like a network of fine threads. The parasite grows throughout the crab's internal tissues, forming a branching system that reaches deep into the host's body. It is somewhat like a plant sending roots through soil, except in this case, the soil is a living animal. Over time, the parasite develops an external structure beneath the crab's abdomen. This structure, called an externa, resembles a small sac attached to the underside of the host. Inside this sac are the parasite's reproductive organs. But the real story lies in what happens inside the crab. As the parasite's internal network spreads, it begins altering the crab's biology. The parasite absorbs nutrients directly from the host's body, but it also does something more unusual. It changes how the crab behaves. Crabs infected by parasitic barnacles often stop reproducing entirely. Their reproductive organs shrink or become inactive, because the parasite redirects the host's energy toward its own growth. The crab continues living, feeding and moving normally in many ways, but it no longer produces offspring of its own. Instead, the crab begins caring for the parasite's reproductive sac. Female crabs normally carry their eggs beneath their abdomen, protecting and cleaning them until they hatch. The parasite takes advantage of this instinct. When the externa develops beneath the crab's body, The host treats it as if it were its own egg mass. The crab gently cleans the sac and protects it from harm. When the parasite releases larvae into the water, the crab performs the same movements it would use to help its own eggs hatch. In other words, the crab unknowingly becomes a caretaker for the parasite's offspring. Even more remarkable is what happens when the host is a male crab. In many species infected by parasitic barnacles, male crabs undergo changes that make them behave more like females. Their bodies may widen slightly, resembling the shape of a female crab's abdomen. Their behaviour shifts as well, allowing them to perform the same egg-carrying actions that female crabs normally carry out. The parasite effectively reshapes the host's biology to suit its own reproductive needs. From a scientific perspective, this phenomenon is known as parasitic castration. The parasite prevents the host from reproducing and instead uses the host's resources to produce its own offspring. But what makes parasitic barnacles especially fascinating is the subtlety of their influence. The crab is not killed. It continues feeding, moving and defending itself. In fact, the parasite benefits from keeping the crab alive and healthy. The healthier the host remains, the longer the parasite can reproduce. So rather than destroying the crab, the parasite modifies its behaviour in ways that support the parasite's life cycle. This strategy allows parasitic barnacles to persist in marine ecosystems for long periods. A single infected crab may carry the parasite for much of its life, and during that time, the parasite's larvae drift into the ocean, searching for new hosts. Researchers studying these relationships have found that parasitic barnacles can dramatically influence crab populations. Because infected crabs no longer reproduce, large numbers of parasites can reduce the birth rates of host species in certain regions. At the same time, the parasites themselves depend entirely on the presence of their hosts. If crab populations decline too sharply, the parasites lose their environment as well. As with many parasitic relationships, a balance tends to develop. Hosts evolve defences that make infection more difficult. Parasites evolve new strategies to overcome those defences. The result is an ongoing evolutionary interaction between the two species. And parasitic barnacles are only one example of crustaceans that hijack their hosts. Other parasitic crustaceans attach themselves to fish or marine mammals, feeding on blood or tissue while remaining partially embedded in the host body. Certain species of copepods, which are small crustaceans often no larger than a grain of rice, attach to fish and burrow into their skin. Once attached, they anchor themselves firmly and begin feeding. Some develop elongated bodies that hang outside the fish, while their heads remain embedded deep within tissues. To a passing observer, these parasites may look like strange appendages growing from the host. Yet inside the fish, the parasite is securely anchored, drawing nutrients from its surroundings. Another group of parasitic crustaceans targets the gills of fish. The gills are rich in blood vessels and oxygen, making them attractive feeding sites for parasites. Small crustaceans attach themselves to delicate gill filaments and begin consuming blood or tissue. In heavy infections, these parasites can damage the host's ability to breathe efficiently, but in many cases, fish tolerate small numbers of gill parasites without serious harm. Again, the relationship often settles into a balance where the parasite survives without overwhelming its host. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of parasitic crustaceans is how completely some of them abandon their original body plan. The larval stage may resemble a typical crustacean, with legs and sensory organs. Once inside the host, however, the parasite may transform into something that no longer looks like a crustacean at all. It becomes little more than a sac connected to a network of internal filaments. Its only function is reproduction. All other structures disappear because the host provides everything necessary for survival. Evolution, in this case, favours simplicity. The parasite no longer needs to search for food, escape predators, or navigate the ocean. The host performs those tasks. The parasite focuses entirely on growing and producing offspring. From the perspective of marine biology, these relationships reveal just how flexible evolution can be. Animals that once lived freely in the ocean gradually adapted to life inside other creatures. Over time, they became so specialised that their entire existence depends on manipulating a host. And yet the host continues living, often unaware that its body has become a home for another organism. The ocean within the ocean grows stranger the closer scientists look. Some parasites hide deep inside tissues, others attach themselves externally. A few alter their host's biology so thoroughly that the host body effectively becomes part of the parasite's life cycle. Still, parasitic crustaceans are not the only creatures that take advantage of hosts in unusual ways. In some cases, the resident organism is not a worm or a crustacean at all, but another fish. And these fish do something even more surprising. They live inside other fish. When most people imagine fish, they picture creatures moving freely through open water. Fish glide through currents, form schools, or drift quietly through dark ocean depths. They appear independent, navigating the sea on their own terms. Yet the ocean contains species that follow a far stranger path. Some fish do not simply swim beside others or hide among coral. Instead, they live inside other fish. At first, this idea might sound impossible. Fish are animals with bones, organs, and muscles. They are not hollow shells waiting to be occupied, but the ocean is full of unexpected strategies, and certain species have evolved ways to enter the bodies of other fish and remain there for extended periods. The most well-known example of this unusual lifestyle belongs to a small group of fish called pearlfish. Pearlfish are slender, eel-like creatures with smooth, flexible bodies that allow them to slip into narrow spaces. Many species grow only a few centimetres long, though some can reach lengths closer to 30 centimetres. Their bodies lack large scales, making them soft and flexible, which helps them move through tight openings. And tight openings are exactly what they look for. Instead of building nests or hiding among rocks, many pearlfish seek shelter inside other marine animals. One of their preferred hosts is the sea cucumber. Sea cucumbers are slow-moving animals related to starfish and sea urchins. They crawl along the ocean floor, feeding on organic material found in sediment. Their bodies are elongated and soft, with a simple digestive system that runs from mouth to rear opening. For most animals, the sea cucumber's body might not seem like an appealing place to live. For a pearlfish, however, it can be the perfect refuge. Pearlfish often approach sea cucumbers from behind and slip into the host through its rear opening. The fish wriggles gently inside until most or all of its body is hidden within the sea cucumber's internal cavity. Once inside, the fish may remain there for hours, days, or even longer. The sea cucumber continues crawling along the sea floor, unaware or only mildly affected by its unusual guest. Inside, the pearlfish rests safely protected from predators. The ocean floor can be a dangerous place for small fish. Larger predators patrol constantly, searching for easy meals, but inside a sea cucumber, the pearlfish is shielded by the host body. Few predators would attempt to attack a sea cucumber simply to reach a tiny fish hidden inside. In this way, the sea cucumber becomes both shelter and camouflage. Some pearlfish leave their hosts periodically to hunt small crustaceans or worms on the seafloor. After feeding, they return to the sea cucumber for safety. Others remain inside almost continuously, emerging only briefly before slipping back into their host. Not all pearlfish behave exactly the same way. Some species appear to be relatively harmless guests, sharing space without causing significant damage. Others may feed on the host's internal tissues, which moves the relationship closer to parasitism. In these cases, the sea cucumber provides both shelter and food. The distinction between guest and parasite can vary depending on the species involved. Scientists studying pearlfish often observe their behaviour using underwater cameras or by examining hosts carefully. What they find is a relationship that sits somewhere between cooperation and exploitation. The sea cucumber rarely dies because of a single pearlfish, but the fish clearly benefits more from the arrangement than the host does. Pearlfish are not the only animals that take advantage of the interiors of other marine creatures. Certain fish parasites also spend portions of their lives inside larger hosts. But unlike pearlfish, which usually inhabit body cavities, some parasites invade specific organs. One of the most famous examples involves the tongue-eating louse, which will appear later in our exploration. For now, it is enough to note that the ocean contains fish capable of occupying spaces inside other animals in ways that are surprisingly complex. Living inside a host offers several advantages. Protection is the most obvious one. Small fish are vulnerable in open water, predators can strike quickly, and hiding places are limited. Inside a host, however, the fish is protected by the host body. The host also moves through the ocean, providing transportation. As the sea cucumber crawls across the seafloor, the pearlfish travels with it. This mobility allows the fish to explore different feeding grounds without exposing itself to predators during every movement. There may also be advantages related to temperature and stability. The interior of a host tends to be more stable than the surrounding environment. Currents, temperature changes and other fluctuations affect the outer ocean more dramatically than they affect internal body cavities. For a small fish, this stability can be valuable, yet living inside another animal requires special adaptations. The host's body cavity is not a wide open space. It is a narrow environment filled with organs and tissues. To navigate this space, pearlfish have evolved elongated bodies that can bend easily. Their muscles allow them to move backward or forward with smooth, wriggling motions. Their skin produces mucus that reduces friction, helping them slide into and out of tight openings. Many species are also nocturnal. They emerge from their hosts at night when predators are less active, searching for food before returning to shelter. During the day, they remain hidden. This pattern reduces the risk of being spotted while travelling between hosts. Scientists have occasionally observed situations where more than one pearlfish occupies the same sea cucumber. In these cases, the internal space becomes a small shared habitat. The fish may tolerate each other or compete for room depending on the species involved. The sea cucumber itself continues its quiet life, feeding on sediment and slowly moving across the ocean floor. For the host, the presence of a small fish inside its body may be little more than a minor inconvenience. Yet the relationship highlights an important concept about marine ecosystems. Animals are not always separate individuals moving independently through the ocean. They can become environments for other species. Hosts become habitats. And once evolution discovers this possibility, many organisms begin exploring it. Pearlfish represent one of the more dramatic examples because their entire bodies enter their hosts. But similar strategies appear elsewhere in the ocean. Small crustaceans hide inside fish gills. Worms coil through internal organs. Microscopic parasites travel through bloodstreams. Each organism occupies a niche within the host's anatomy. From the outside, a fish or sea cucumber may appear alone. Inside, however, another creature may be resting quietly. The ocean within the ocean continues to reveal new layers of life, and sometimes those layers involve relationships that are stranger still. Because while pearlfish use hosts primarily as shelter, other organisms go much further. Some parasites do not merely live inside their hosts, they replace parts of them. Out on the seafloor, far below the bright surface waters where sunlight dances across waves, the ocean often feels calm and unhurried. Sediment drifts slowly downward like a gentle snowfall of organic particles. Small creatures move patiently across the bottom, feeding, burrowing, or simply resting. Among the most common animals living in these quiet regions are sea cucumbers. At first glance, sea cucumbers may not seem especially remarkable. Their bodies are long and soft, usually shaped like thick cylinders resting on the ocean floor. They move slowly, sometimes barely at all, using rows of tiny tube feet that help them crawl through sediment. They feed by collecting organic particles from the seafloor. As they move, they draw sediment into their mouths, digest the nutritious material inside it, and release the remaining sand behind them. It is a simple life. steady and unhurried. Yet sea cucumbers possess a body structure that makes them surprisingly interesting to other creatures. Unlike fish or crustaceans, which have compact internal organs packed tightly inside their bodies, sea cucumbers have a large internal cavity filled with fluid and loosely arranged tissues. This cavity creates a spacious interior environment. For some animals, that space represents an opportunity. Over time, several species have evolved to treat sea cucumbers almost like living apartments. Inside the body cavity of a sea cucumber, small creatures can find shelter, stability, and protection from predators that roam the seafloor. Marine biologists studying sea cucumbers often discover unexpected residents hiding within them. Some of these residents are the pearlfish mentioned earlier. These slender fish slip into the sea cucumber through its rear opening and settle inside the body cavity, where they remain hidden. But pearlfish are not the only tenants. Small crustaceans, worms, and even tiny shrimp have been found living within sea cucumbers as well. Each of these animals uses the host in slightly different ways. For some species, the sea cucumber provides nothing more than a safe hiding place. The resident animal enters the body cavity, rests there while predators pass overhead, and eventually leaves again. Other tenants remain for much longer periods. They settle into the internal cavity and make it their permanent home. The sea cucumber becomes not just a temporary shelter, but a living habitat that supports their entire life cycle. From the perspective of the resident animal, the advantages are obvious. The ocean floor can be dangerous for small creatures. Predators patrol constantly, searching for movement among the sediment. Fish, crabs, and octopuses all feed on small animals whenever they find them. Inside a sea cucumber, however, the situation is very different. The host body provides a soft barrier between the resident and the outside world. Predators rarely attempt to tear open a sea cucumber simply to reach something hidden inside. The host also moves slowly across the seafloor, carrying its tenant along with it. As the sea cucumber feeds on sediment, the internal environment may provide access to organic particles or microorganisms that drift through the body cavity. For some tenants, this environment is comfortable enough to remain in almost continuously. Yet the sea cucumber itself is not entirely defenseless. When threatened, certain species can perform one of the strangest defensive behaviors in the animal kingdom. They eject parts of their internal organs out of their rear opening. This process, known as evisceration, releases sticky or toxic tissues into the surrounding water. Predators that attempt to bite or attack may suddenly find themselves entangled in these expelled organs. Meanwhile, the sea cucumber slowly crawls away. Over time, the lost organs regenerate. For creatures living inside sea cucumbers, this defensive strategy can be somewhat inconvenient. If the host ejects its internal organs, any resident animals may be expelled along with them. However, some tenants appear to tolerate this risk because the benefits of living inside the host are still greater than the dangers. In fact, certain species have adapted to life inside sea cucumbers so effectively that they rarely leave at all. Marine researchers studying deep-sea environments have occasionally found sea cucumbers containing multiple residents at once. A pearlfish might share the body cavity with small crustaceans or worms. Each organism occupies its own space inside the host. The sea cucumber becomes a miniature ecosystem. The internal cavity acts like a small room where several species coexist. The host itself continues its slow journey across the seafloor, feeding and moving normally. From the outside, nothing appears unusual. Yet inside, an entire community may be living quietly. The arrangement can sometimes resemble a biological version of shared housing. The host provides shelter and movement through the environment. The tenants adapt their behavior to avoid harming the host too severely. If the host becomes sick or dies, the residents lose their shelter. Because of this, many tenants behave more like careful guests than destructive parasites. They may feed on small particles drifting through the host's body cavity rather than consuming the host's tissues directly. This approach allows them to survive without severely damaging the animal that protects them. Marine biologists often classify these relationships as commensalism. The tenant benefits from the shelter, while the host experiences little noticeable harm. However, the boundary between harmless guest and parasite can sometimes blur. Certain pearlfish species have been observed nibbling on the internal organs of their sea cucumber hosts. When this happens, the relationship becomes more parasitic. The fish receives both shelter and food from the host. Yet even in these cases, the host may continue functioning normally for long periods. Sea cucumbers are surprisingly resilient animals. Their bodies can regenerate lost tissues, and their simple internal structure allows them to recover from injuries that might be fatal to more complex organisms. This resilience may be one reason why they serve as such common hosts. Animals capable of surviving damage provide stable environments for parasites and commensal species. Over time, these hosts become important habitats within the marine ecosystem. Scientists sometimes refer to such hosts as ecosystem engineers. By providing shelter for other species, they influence the structure of the surrounding biological community. A single sea cucumber drifting across the seafloor may support several different organisms within its body. Each of those organisms interacts with the host and with each other in subtle ways. The result is a layered ecosystem hidden within a single animal. Studying these hidden ecosystems requires patience and careful observation. Many discoveries have occurred when researchers examine hosts closely after collecting them from the sea floor. At first, the sea cucumber appears ordinary. Then a small fish slips out of the body cavity. A tiny shrimp emerges from between internal tissues. Worms coil quietly within the host's digestive tract. Each discovery reveals another layer of life that would otherwise remain invisible. Modern underwater cameras have also helped scientists observe these relationships in the animal's natural environment. Remotely operated vehicles descending into deep-sea habitats occasionally capture footage of pearlfish entering sea cucumbers. The fish approaches cautiously, aligns itself with the rear opening of the host, and gently slides inside. Moments later, the fish disappears completely. The sea cucumber continues crawling slowly across the seafloor, as if nothing unusual has happened. To an outside observer, the moment might seem almost surreal. One animal calmly entering another as though it were stepping through a doorway. Yet in the ocean, this behaviour has existed for millions of years. Evolution has shaped both host and tenant into partners sharing the same living space. The sea cucumber provides shelter and movement. The tenant adapts its body and behaviour to fit within that environment. Together they form another example of the ocean within the ocean, and these living apartments are only one of many unusual strategies that marine creatures use to survive. Some animals choose hosts that float freely through the water rather than crawling across the seafloor. And when those hosts happen to be jellyfish, the arrangement can become even more unusual. If you have ever seen a jellyfish drifting through the ocean, it probably appeared delicate and almost fragile. Jellyfish move slowly, pulsing their soft bell-shaped bodies as they float through the water. Their long tentacles trail behind them like fine threads, sometimes stretching far longer than the body itself. They do not have bones, brains, or complex organs like fish or mammals. Their bodies are mostly made of water, supported by a thin layer of living tissue. And yet, despite their simple appearance, jellyfish can become moving habitats for other creatures. In fact, several marine animals spend part of their lives living inside or among jellyfish. To understand how this happens, it helps to look closely at the structure of a jellyfish. A jellyfish body is essentially a gelatinous dome called the bell. Beneath the bell hangs a central structure containing the mouth and digestive system. From the edges of the bell extend tentacles equipped with stinging cells used to capture prey. Inside the bell itself is a thick layer of jelly-like material that provides structure and buoyancy. Although the jellyfish appears soft and translucent, its body contains spaces where small organisms can hide. For tiny marine animals searching for shelter in the open ocean, a jellyfish can provide something rare: protection. The tentacles of many jellyfish contain specialized stinging cells called nematocysts. These microscopic structures fire tiny harpoon-like threads capable of injecting venom into prey or predators. Fish and other animals that touch the tentacles may receive painful stings, but certain small species have developed ways to live safely among them. One of the most fascinating examples involves juvenile fish known as medusa fish. Young medusa fish often swim among the tentacles of jellyfish, weaving carefully through the dangerous strands. While many animals would be stung immediately, these fish appear to have protective mucus on their skin that prevents the jellyfish's stinging cells from firing. This allows the fish to move freely within a space that most predators avoid. For a small fish, this environment offers excellent protection. Predators that might normally hunt the fish hesitate to approach the jellyfish's tentacles. The fish, meanwhile, gains a moving shield that drifts through the ocean currents. As the jellyfish pulses through the water, the fish travels with it. Sometimes the relationship goes even further. In certain cases, small fish slip inside the bell of the jellyfish itself. Within the jelly-like structure, they find a sheltered space where they can rest and feed. Some fish feed on tiny organisms caught by the jellyfish's tentacles. Others may nibble gently on the jellyfish's tissues. The arrangement can vary depending on the species involved. In many cases, the fish benefits greatly from the relationship, while the jellyfish experiences little noticeable harm. This type of interaction is often described as commensalism. The fish gains protection and access to food, while the jellyfish continues drifting through the ocean with minimal disruption. Yet the relationship is not always entirely neutral. Some fish occasionally feed directly on the jellyfish's tissues, or on the prey that the jellyfish captures. When this happens, the interaction moves closer to parasitism. Still, the jellyfish often tolerates the presence of its tenant. Jellyfish are simple animals with limited sensory abilities. They do not possess a central brain capable of complex responses. As long as the tenant does not cause serious damage, the jellyfish may continue its normal pulsing movements without reacting strongly. Fish are not the only creatures that use jellyfish as living shelters. Small crustaceans, including certain shrimp and amphipods, have also been observed living among jellyfish tentacles. These tiny animals cling to the tentacles or hide beneath the bell, feeding on scraps of food captured by the jellyfish. For them, the tentacles function like a protective fence. Anything large enough to threaten them risks being stung. This creates a surprisingly effective refuge in the open ocean, where hiding places are otherwise scarce. Some species of crab even spend their early life stages among jellyfish. Young crabs attach themselves to the jellyfish's body and travel wherever the host drifts. During this time, they are shielded from predators and gain access to food drifting through the water. As they grow larger, they eventually leave the jellyfish and begin life on the seafloor. For these crabs, the jellyfish acts almost like a floating nursery. The open ocean is a difficult environment for young animals. Many larvae and juveniles are eaten before they reach maturity. By attaching themselves to jellyfish, young crabs increase their chances of surviving those early vulnerable stages. The jellyfish, meanwhile, continues drifting through currents, carrying its passengers along. In some cases, the relationship between jellyfish and their tenants can become quite crowded. Marine biologists have occasionally observed jellyfish hosting multiple small fish or crustaceans at once. Each animal occupies a slightly different space among the tentacles or within the bell. The jellyfish becomes a tiny floating ecosystem. Predators avoid it because of the stinging tentacles. Small tenants gather inside for protection. Prey captured by the jellyfish provides food that may also feed the residents. All of this happens while the jellyfish pulses slowly through the ocean, propelled by gentle contractions of its bell. What makes this arrangement especially interesting is how it reflects the constant search for shelter in the open sea. Unlike coral reefs or rocky coastlines, the open ocean contains few solid structures. Animals living there often rely on creative strategies to avoid predators. Some hide in drifting seaweed, others form schools using numbers as protection, and some take advantage of animals like jellyfish, turning them into moving shelters. From an evolutionary perspective, this strategy has clear benefits. Jellyfish are abundant in many parts of the ocean. They drift through currents that carry them across wide distances. For small animals capable of tolerating their stinging cells, they offer a reliable form of protection. Over time, natural selection favours species that can survive in this unusual environment. Fish that develop protective mucus coatings can swim among the tentacles. Crustaceans with strong gripping limbs can cling to the jellyfish's bell. Each adaptation strengthens the relationship between host and tenant. Of course, jellyfish themselves are not entirely passive in these interactions. Although they lack complex nervous systems, they still respond to touch and environmental changes. If a tenant causes too much disturbance or damage, the jellyfish may contract its bell or release mucus in response. These reactions can sometimes drive unwanted visitors away. But for well-adapted tenants, the relationship remains stable. They move carefully among the tentacles, avoiding sudden movements that might trigger the jellyfish's defences. The result is a quiet coexistence that can last for extended periods. Scientists studying these relationships often describe them as examples of how life finds opportunities in unexpected places. The ocean is full of animals drifting through water, each one interacting with the environment in subtle ways. Sometimes those interactions create new habitats. A jellyfish becomes a shelter, a sea cucumber becomes an apartment, a fish becomes a host for worms and microscopic residents. These layered relationships form the hidden structure of marine ecosystems, and as researchers continue exploring the ocean's depths, they keep discovering new examples of animals living inside or alongside others in ways that seem almost unbelievable. Some of those relationships are relatively gentle, involving shared space and occasional food scraps. Others are far more dramatic. In certain cases, a parasite does not simply live inside a host. It replaces a part of the host body entirely. If there is one marine parasite that tends to surprise people more than most others, it is the creature known as the tongue-eating louse. The name alone sounds dramatic, and at first it almost seems exaggerated. It suggests something out of a science fiction story rather than a real biological relationship. Yet this animal exists, and its life cycle is one of the most unusual examples of how a parasite can interact with its host. The tongue-eating louse belongs to a group of crustaceans called isopods. Isopods are relatives of crabs and shrimp, though many of them look more like flattened insects. Some species live on land, including the small woodlice that hide beneath rocks and damp leaves. In the ocean, however, certain isopods have evolved into parasites that attach themselves to fish. The species most often associated with the tongue-eating behaviour is called Cymothoa exigua. At first glance, the parasite itself is not particularly large. Adult individuals may reach a few centimetres in length, with a flattened body and several pairs of legs that allow it to grip tightly onto surfaces. Yet the location where this parasite lives makes it remarkable. It resides inside the mouth of a fish. The life of a tongue-eating louse begins as a tiny larva drifting through the ocean, much like many other marine parasites. At this stage it is microscopic, part of the vast planktonic community that floats through currents. Eventually the larva encounters a fish. Drawn perhaps by chemical signals released through the fish's gills, the parasite attaches itself to one of the delicate gill filaments inside the fish's mouth. Here it begins feeding on the host's blood. As the parasite grows, it moves deeper into the fish's mouth and eventually attaches itself to the base of the fish's tongue. This is where the story becomes particularly unusual. The parasite continues feeding on blood flowing through the tongue until the organ begins to wither. Over time, the fish's tongue shrinks and eventually disappears. At that point, the parasite remains attached at the base of the mouth, effectively taking the place where the tongue once was. The fish, surprisingly, continues to live. In fact, the parasite becomes something like a functional replacement for the missing organ. When the fish opens and closes its mouth, the parasite moves with it. Food passing through the mouth presses against the parasite's body in much the same way it would press against a tongue. The parasite does not digest the food itself, but it allows the fish to continue feeding normally. Meanwhile, the louse continues drawing small amounts of blood and nutrients from the host. This relationship may last for the remainder of the fish's life. From an outside perspective, the fish often appears perfectly healthy. Only when someone looks inside its mouth does the unusual resident become visible. Instead of a tongue, there is a small crustacean sitting where the organ once was. Despite how dramatic this might sound, the fish often tolerates the parasite surprisingly well. Once the tongue has withered and the parasite takes its place, the damage appears to stabilize. The fish continues eating, swimming, and reproducing. The parasite, meanwhile, remains securely attached. One of the most interesting aspects of the tongue-eating louse involves its reproductive strategy. Like many isopods, these parasites have separate male and female individuals. However, they also possess the ability to change sex under certain conditions. When a larval louse first attaches to a fish, it often develops as a male. If another individual later enters the same host, one of them may transform into a female. The female becomes larger and settles in the position where the tongue once existed. The male usually remains attached nearby, often within the gill chamber. Together they reproduce, releasing larvae into the surrounding water. Those larvae drift away to begin the process again with new hosts. This arrangement allows the parasite to ensure reproduction, even when only a few individuals encounter a suitable fish. Scientists studying tongue-eating lice have noted that infections are relatively rare in most fish populations. Only a small percentage of individuals carry the parasite at any given time. This helps maintain balance between host and parasite populations. If too many fish were infected, host populations might decline sharply. Instead, the parasite spreads gradually, affecting only a portion of available hosts. From an evolutionary perspective, this balance is important. The parasite depends entirely on the fish for survival. If the host species disappeared, the parasite would disappear as well. For that reason, natural selection favours parasites that do not kill their hosts quickly. The tongue-eating louse removes the tongue, which sounds severe, yet the fish adapts to the change. Because the parasite occupies the same physical space as the missing organ, the fish's feeding process remains largely intact. This unusual adaptation allows both organisms to continue living. Researchers believe that the parasite's ability to replace the tongue may be one reason the host survives the infection. If the parasite simply destroyed the tongue without taking its place, the fish might struggle to feed. By acting as a structural substitute, the parasite reduces the impact of the damage it caused. Still, the presence of such a parasite highlights just how complex host-parasite relationships can become. Many parasites simply attach themselves to hosts and feed quietly. Others alter host behavior or reproductive systems. The tongue-eating louse goes even further by physically replacing an organ. In doing so, it demonstrates how evolution can produce solutions that seem almost unbelievable at first. Yet these relationships are not acts of cruelty or intention. They are the result of countless generations of adaptation. Parasites that survived and reproduced passed their traits forward. Hosts that tolerated or resisted parasites also passed their traits forward. Over time, these interactions shaped both species. What remains today is a delicate balance between invader and host. The fish carries the parasite without immediate harm. The parasite obtains nutrients and a place to reproduce. Together they form another example of the ocean within the ocean. Inside the mouth of a fish swims a crustacean that has become part of the host's anatomy. It is a strange arrangement, but not the only one. Across the ocean, many parasites have evolved ways to redirect the energy and biology of their hosts, drawing resources from them in subtle and complex ways. When scientists study parasites, one of the first patterns they notice is how skillfully these organisms redirect the resources of their hosts. A parasite rarely builds its own environment from scratch. Instead, it borrows an existing body and quietly taps into the systems that body already uses to stay alive. Circulation, digestion, respiration, and movement are all processes the host must perform every moment simply to survive. parasites step into that ongoing stream of activity and take advantage of it. They draw nutrients that the host gathers, they move through the host's bloodstream or tissues, and they rely on the host's organs to maintain stable conditions. In a sense, the parasite becomes a passenger inside a fully functioning machine. The host continues doing all the work of living, while the parasite collects a share of the energy flowing through that system. This process is sometimes described as energy theft, though the word theft might make it sound more deliberate than it really is. Parasites are not planning or deciding to steal anything. They are simply organisms that evolved to survive by using resources already present inside another animal. Yet the effect is unmistakable. Energy that would normally support the host's growth, reproduction, or activity is diverted towards sustaining the parasite. Inside the ocean, where food can be scarce and survival often depends on efficiency, this strategy has proven remarkably successful. Many parasites have evolved bodies designed specifically for absorbing energy from their hosts. Some species of parasitic worms, for example, have no digestive tract at all. Instead of eating in the usual sense, they absorb nutrients directly through their outer skin. Inside the host's digestive system, food has already been broken down into simple molecules. These nutrients pass through the worm's surface and into its tissues. The host performs the difficult work of finding and digesting food. The parasite collects a portion of the results. This arrangement allows the parasite to maintain a very simple body structure. Without the need for a mouth, stomach, or intestines, much of its anatomy can be devoted to reproduction. Some parasitic worms produce enormous numbers of eggs. Each egg has the potential to drift into the ocean and begin the cycle again with a new host. The same principle appears in many other parasites. Crustaceans that attach to fish gills draw blood directly from the host's circulatory system. Protozoan parasites living in tissues multiply by consuming nutrients from surrounding cells. Each species has evolved a method for tapping into the host's internal energy supply. Yet energy does not flow through the host in only one direction. Hosts are not passive containers. They possess immune systems designed to detect and eliminate invaders. When a parasite enters the body, the host often responds by producing specialized cells and chemical signals intended to destroy or isolate the intruder. This creates an ongoing struggle between host defenses and parasite survival. Parasites evolve ways to avoid detection. Some hide in tissues where immune responses are weaker. Others mimic the chemical signals of the host's own cells, allowing them to blend into the surrounding environment. Certain parasites even release substances that suppress the host's immune reactions. These adaptations allow the parasite to remain inside the host for extended periods without being removed. Over millions of years, hosts and parasites have shaped each other through this constant interaction. Hosts develop stronger defenses. Parasites evolve new strategies to overcome those defenses. The result is an evolutionary balance that allows both organisms to continue existing. In many cases, the host loses only a small fraction of its energy to parasites. A healthy fish carrying a few worms may still grow normally, hunt for food, and reproduce. The parasite gains enough energy to survive and produce offspring, but not enough to overwhelm the host. This balance is important for both sides. If a parasite drains too much energy from its host, the host may weaken or die. A dead host no longer provides nutrients or shelter. Parasites that kill their host too quickly often fail to spread to new hosts. For that reason, natural selection tends to favour parasites that take only what they need to survive. Yet the effects of energy diversion can still be significant. Hosts carrying parasites may grow more slowly because some nutrients are being redirected. Reproductive output may decline if energy that would normally produce eggs or sperm is instead used to support parasites. In extreme cases, parasites can even alter how hosts allocate energy within their bodies. One well-known example involves parasitic barnacles that infect crabs. As mentioned earlier, these parasites prevent the crab from reproducing. Energy that would normally be used to produce eggs is redirected toward the parasite's growth and reproduction. The crab continues feeding and moving normally, but its biological resources are no longer devoted to its own offspring. Instead, they sustain the parasite living inside it. Other parasites influence host metabolism in subtler ways. Some alter hormone levels or chemical signals that regulate growth and behavior. These changes can affect how hosts move, feed, or respond to predators. In certain fish species, parasites have been linked to changes in swimming patterns or feeding habits. The host may become slightly slower or less cautious. These behavioural changes sometimes increase the chances that the host will be eaten by a predator. For the parasite, this outcome may be beneficial if the predator represents the next stage of its life cycle. Energy stolen from the host supports the parasite's growth until the moment it moves into a new host through the food chain. These complex interactions show how parasites are deeply integrated into marine ecosystems. They are not simply freeloaders drifting through the ocean. They are active participants in the transfer of energy between species. When a predator eats an infected fish, the parasite may transfer along with the meal. Energy taken from the original host becomes part of the parasite's continued development inside the new host. In this way, parasites help connect different levels of the food web. They move nutrients and biological influence between species that might otherwise appear unrelated. Some scientists have even suggested that parasites play an important role in maintaining ecological balance. By reducing the reproductive success of certain hosts, parasites may prevent any single species from dominating an ecosystem. This allows a greater diversity of species to coexist. The ocean is filled with countless interactions like these, many of which remain invisible without careful study. Inside a fish, a parasite quietly draws nutrients. Inside that parasite, microscopic organisms may live as well. Energy flows through multiple layers of life. Each organism borrows from another, and each contributes to the complex web of relationships that shapes marine ecosystems. Even though parasites are often described as harmful, their existence reflects the adaptability of life. Evolution has produced organisms capable of surviving in environments as unusual as the bloodstream of a fish or the tissues of a crab. Instead of building homes in sand or coral, these creatures use living bodies as their habitats. They borrow organs, circulation and metabolism from their hosts. In doing so, they transform those hosts into living landscapes filled with hidden residents. Yet not every internal resident drains energy from its host. Some creatures live inside other animals without causing noticeable harm at all. They settle quietly into their hosts and remain there for years, sometimes unnoticed for the entire lifespan of the host itself. When people hear about parasites living inside animals, it is easy to imagine a constant struggle between invader and host. One might picture a fish growing weak, its body fighting desperately against a harmful organism that has taken up residence inside it. But in many cases, the relationship between host and internal resident is much quieter than that. Some creatures live inside their host for years without causing any obvious harm at all. The host continues swimming, feeding, and reproducing as though nothing unusual has happened. Inside its body, however, another organism is present. This situation occurs more often than many people realize. The ocean is full of animals carrying internal passengers that remain almost invisible to their hosts. These organisms draw small amounts of energy or simply share space without interfering with the host's daily activities. From the host's perspective, the tenant may barely exist. To understand how this happens, it helps to think about the balance between host and parasite. If a parasite harms its host too severely, the host may die before the parasite has a chance to reproduce or spread to new hosts. This would not be an effective survival strategy for the parasite. Over time, natural selection tends to favour parasites that place only a small burden on their hosts. Those parasites survive longer because their hosts survive longer. As a result, many parasitic relationships settle into a stable arrangement. The parasite gains access to food or shelter. The host experiences little or no noticeable damage. Marine biologists often discover these quiet relationships only when they examine hosts closely in laboratories or during scientific surveys. A fish might appear perfectly healthy while swimming through the water. Yet inside its tissues, small worms may be coiled between muscle fibers. Microscopic parasites may inhabit its bloodstream. Tiny crustaceans may cling inside its gills. The fish behaves normally because the number of parasites is low, or because the parasites have adapted to avoid causing significant harm. This form of coexistence is surprisingly common. In some fish species, nearly every individual carries small parasites throughout its life, yet the population as a whole remains healthy. These parasites have become part of the host's natural biological environment. They exist alongside the host's immune system, digestive system, and other internal processes without disrupting them severely. The host's immune system plays an important role in maintaining this balance. When a parasite first enters the body, the host's defences may attempt to eliminate it. Immune cells surround the intruder, releasing chemicals designed to damage or destroy foreign organisms. If the parasite cannot avoid these defences, it may be killed or expelled. But some parasites have evolved ways to survive these attacks. Certain species coat themselves with molecules that resemble the host's own tissues. This disguise allows them to blend into the host's internal environment. To the immune system, the parasite may appear less threatening or even invisible. Other parasites hide in parts of the body where immune responses are weaker. The digestive tract, for example, contains many foreign substances passing through during normal digestion. Parasites living in this environment may avoid detection more easily than those embedded in muscle or blood. Over time, the host's immune system may also learn to tolerate certain parasites rather than attacking them constantly. An endless battle between host and parasite would consume large amounts of energy. Instead, the immune system sometimes reaches a compromise. It limits the parasite's growth without completely removing it. The parasite remains present, but its numbers stay low enough that the host continues functioning normally. This arrangement resembles a long-term truce. The parasite receives shelter and nutrients. The host avoids serious illness. Both survive. Another factor that helps maintain this balance is the parasite's own biology. Many parasites reproduce slowly once inside a host. They may release eggs or larvae only periodically rather than continuously. This limits how many individuals develop within a single host at one time. If too many parasites appeared simultaneously, the host might become overwhelmed. By spreading reproduction across time, the parasite avoids placing excessive stress on its environment. From the parasite's perspective, the host is not just a food source, it is an entire habitat. Maintaining that habitat is essential. Destroying it would end the parasite's own survival. Because of this, many parasites behave in ways that appear almost careful. They attach to tissues where they can draw nutrients without damaging vital organs. They regulate their reproduction to avoid overcrowding. They evolve biochemical tricks that reduce inflammation or immune reactions. All of these adaptations contribute to a quiet coexistence. Scientists sometimes refer to this kind of relationship as a chronic infection. The parasite remains inside the host for long periods, often without causing symptoms. In marine ecosystems, chronic infections are common. Fish, crustaceans, and marine mammals may carry parasites for much of their lives. Yet they continue feeding, migrating, and reproducing as usual. For the host, the parasite becomes part of the background conditions of life. Just as the ocean contains countless microscopic organisms drifting through water, the host's body contains small residents living quietly within it. This idea can feel unusual at first, but it reflects the complexity of biological systems. Animals are rarely isolated individuals. They are communities of interacting organisms. Inside a host, bacteria help digest food. Microscopic organisms influence metabolism. Parasites draw small amounts of nutrients. Each participant contributes to the overall environment within the body. Even in humans, this concept applies. Our bodies contain trillions of microorganisms that live inside the digestive system and on the skin. Many of them are beneficial. Some are neutral. A few can become harmful under certain conditions. The balance between these organisms shapes health in ways scientists are still discovering. In the ocean, similar processes occur across many species. Fish carry bacterial communities that assist digestion. Sea cucumbers host tiny animals inside their body cavities. Jellyfish drift through the water with small tenants hiding among their tentacles. Some of these relationships are obvious, others remain hidden until scientists look closely. One of the most interesting aspects of these quiet relationships is how stable they can become over long periods. Certain parasites are found only in specific host species. They have evolved alongside those hosts for millions of years. Their life cycles, anatomy and behaviour are all shaped by the environment inside that host's body. In return, the host's immune system and physiology have adapted to tolerate the parasite's presence. Both species influence each other's evolution. This long-term interaction creates a form of biological familiarity. The parasite becomes part of the host's normal internal community. Neither organism completely eliminates the other. Instead, they coexist. Of course, this balance can sometimes shift. If environmental conditions change, parasites that were once harmless may begin multiplying more rapidly. Stress, pollution, or temperature shifts can weaken a host's immune defences. Under these circumstances, parasites that were previously unnoticed may become harmful. But under stable conditions, the quiet coexistence often continues. The host swims through the ocean unaware of the small residents within its body. The parasites feed gently and reproduce at controlled rates. Life carries on. These hidden relationships remind scientists that ecosystems do not exist only in forests or coral reefs. They also exist inside living bodies. Every host contains its own internal environment, filled with organisms interacting in subtle ways, and sometimes, within that environment, entirely different kinds of partnerships emerge. Because not all internal residents are parasites, some actually help their hosts survive. When creatures live inside other creatures, the relationship is often described in terms of parasites and hosts. One organism takes something, the other loses something, and the balance between them determines how long the arrangement can continue. Yet the ocean does not rely entirely on these one-sided interactions. In many cases, two different organisms share the same body in ways that benefit both of them. These relationships fall into a category known as symbiosis. The word simply refers to two species living closely together over a long period of time. Within that broad definition are several possible outcomes. One of them, mutualism, describes situations where both partners gain something valuable. In the ocean, mutualistic relationships appear in places that might seem unexpected. Some happen on the outside of animals, like cleaner fish removing parasites from the skin of larger fish. Others take place entirely inside the body of the host, hidden from view but essential for survival. One of the most widespread examples involves microscopic organisms living inside the digestive systems of marine animals. These organisms are usually bacteria, and although they are invisible without magnification, their influence on the host's health can be enormous. Many marine animals eat food that is difficult to digest. Seaweeds contain tough cell walls made of complex carbohydrates. Detritus collected from the ocean floor includes organic compounds that are resistant to breakdown. Some animals even consume materials that are partly decomposed or chemically unusual. On their own, many hosts would struggle to extract energy from such meals. Inside their digestive tracts, however, live communities of bacteria capable of producing specialized enzymes. These enzymes break large molecules into smaller components that the host's body can absorb. Nutrients that would otherwise pass through the digestive system unused become available as energy. The host receives a clear advantage from this arrangement. It can survive on food sources that would be useless without microbial assistance. The bacteria benefit as well. The digestive tract offers a stable environment, constant warmth relative to the surrounding water, and a steady supply of organic material arriving with each meal. Instead of drifting unpredictably through the ocean, the bacteria live in a place where nutrients appear regularly. In this way, both species gain something important. This pattern occurs throughout marine ecosystems. Fish that graze on algae often host bacteria that help process plant material. Sea cucumbers feeding on sediment rely on microbial partners to break down organic particles within the sand. Even some crustaceans host bacteria that assist with digestion. The internal environment of these animals becomes a cooperative workspace where host and symbiont share resources. Scientists studying these microbial partnerships sometimes refer to the host and its internal organisms as a combined biological unit. Rather than thinking of the host as a single creature, they consider it part of a larger system composed of many interacting species. Inside a fish's digestive tract, for example, hundreds of microbial species may coexist. Some specialize in breaking down carbohydrates, others process proteins or lipids. Still others produce vitamins that the host body requires but cannot manufacture on its own. Each group performs a specific function, and together they form a complex internal ecosystem. The host provides the environment where this ecosystem can exist. The microbes contribute chemical processes that support the host's metabolism. Neither side could perform these functions as effectively alone. Symbiotic relationships inside marine animals extend beyond digestion. Some microorganisms living within hosts help defend them against disease. They produce compounds that inhibit the growth of harmful bacteria or parasites. By occupying space within tissues or on internal surfaces, beneficial microbes also prevent dangerous species from establishing themselves. This competition creates a form of biological protection. The host carries a community of organisms that effectively guard against invaders. In certain fish species, symbiotic bacteria living on gills or skin produce antimicrobial substances that limit infections. The host continues swimming through water filled with microorganisms, but the protective community reduces the chance that harmful microbes will take hold. Again, both partners benefit. The bacteria receive nutrients and shelter. The host gains an additional layer of defense. Some symbiotic partnerships involve organisms that are larger than bacteria. Small crustaceans occasionally live inside larger hosts, while providing services that help maintain the host's health. In a few cases, tiny shrimps or copepods enter body cavities where they feed on debris, dead tissue, or small parasites. The host loses nothing significant, and the internal cleaner gains a steady source of food. This arrangement resembles maintenance work more than parasitism. The tenant consumes material that might otherwise accumulate inside the host. The host continues living normally while its internal environment remains tidy. Although these relationships may seem unusual, they illustrate how evolution often favours cooperation when it benefits both species. Over many generations, hosts and symbionts adapt to each other's presence. The host may develop structures that support the symbiont. The symbiont evolves traits that make it more effective at performing its role. Eventually, the two species become tightly connected. In extreme cases, the host cannot survive without its symbiotic partner. Some marine animals have digestive systems that depend entirely on microbial communities. Without those microbes, the host would be unable to obtain sufficient nutrients from its food. Similarly, the microbes depend on the host for shelter and resources. If the host disappeared, the microbial community would lose its environment. One of the most remarkable examples of internal symbiosis occurs in deep-sea ecosystems near hydrothermal vents. These environments lie far below the reach of sunlight. Instead of photosynthesis, the base of the food web depends on chemical energy released from the Earth's crust. Certain bacteria living in these regions are capable of chemosynthesis. They use chemicals such as hydrogen sulfide to produce organic compounds that serve as food. Some deep-sea animals host these bacteria inside specialized tissues. The host provides the bacteria with access to chemicals from vent fluids and oxygen from seawater. The bacteria convert those chemicals into nutrients that feed the host. Together they form a partnership that allows both organisms to thrive in a place where most life would struggle to survive. Although hydrothermal vent symbiosis is an extreme example, it demonstrates the same principle seen in smaller marine animals. When two species gain advantages from living together, natural selection tends to preserve and strengthen that relationship. The ocean contains countless variations of this pattern. Hosts carry internal partners that process food, defend against disease, recycle nutrients, or clean internal spaces. In return, those partners receive shelter and resources. These arrangements also influence how scientists understand marine ecosystems. Instead of viewing animals as isolated individuals, researchers increasingly see them as hosts for entire communities. A fish may appear to be a single organism moving through water, yet inside it exists a network of microbial and microscopic life. Each species contributes something to the host's internal environment. This layered structure blurs the boundaries between individuals and ecosystems. A host is both an organism and a habitat. Symbiotic relationships illustrate that cooperation is a powerful force in evolution. Competition certainly exists throughout the ocean, but cooperation often provides equally strong advantages. By sharing space and resources, species can accomplish tasks that neither could achieve alone. Inside the bodies of marine animals, this cooperation unfolds quietly. Microscopic partners digest food, bacteria protect against disease, small tenants maintain internal environments. All of these activities happen beyond the view of most observers. From the outside, the host appears to live its life alone. Inside, a partnership is constantly at work. The ocean within the ocean is not only a place of parasites and hidden invaders, it is also a place where cooperation shapes survival. And as scientists continue exploring these hidden relationships, they are discovering that some hosts carry entire communities of organisms at once, turning individual animals into neighborhoods filled with many different species living together. When marine biologists began studying deep-sea animals more closely, one realization slowly became impossible to ignore. Many creatures moving through the ocean were not alone in the biological sense. Their bodies supported entire communities of other organisms, each occupying a different space and performing a different role. What appeared at first to be a single fish, crab, or drifting animal often turned out to be something more complex. Inside that host lived layers of smaller species interacting quietly with each other. The ocean, in this sense, contains neighborhoods that remain invisible unless someone looks carefully enough to find them. A deep-sea fish swimming through dark water might carry worms inside its digestive tract, microscopic parasites circulating through its blood, bacteria assisting digestion, and small crustaceans hiding within its gills. Each of these organisms occupies a specific location inside the host. The digestive system becomes one habitat, the bloodstream another. The gill chambers form yet another environment where water flows continuously, bringing oxygen and microscopic food particles. Within a single body, several different habitats exist side by side. Scientists studying these relationships sometimes describe hosts as living ecosystems. The host provides the physical structure that allows multiple species to coexist. Each species interacts with the host in its own way, drawing nutrients, providing services, or simply sharing space. Inside these hosts, organisms form small communities that function almost like biological neighborhoods. Some residents stay permanently, others appear only during certain stages of their life cycles. Some benefit the host, while others take resources from it. Together they form a network of relationships that mirrors larger ecosystems found outside the host. The concept becomes clearer when researchers examine individual hosts in detail. Consider a fish living several hundred meters below the surface. At first glance it appears healthy and independent, moving through the water in search of prey. When scientists study that fish closely, however, they may discover several different organisms living within it. In the fish's digestive system, parasitic worms may anchor themselves along the intestinal wall, absorbing nutrients from food passing through. Within the fish's muscles, small larvae may remain coiled in dormant stages, waiting until a predator eats the host and allows them to move to their next host. Inside the gills, small crustaceans may cling to delicate filaments where water flows steadily. Meanwhile, bacteria inside the digestive tract assist with breaking down complex food molecules. All of these organisms share the same host, yet they rarely interfere directly with one another. Each species occupies a different niche within the host's anatomy. This division of space allows multiple species to coexist within the same body. The situation resembles a city where different neighbourhoods support different groups of residents. Some neighbourhoods are busy centres of activity, while others remain quiet and specialised. In a host animal, the digestive tract may serve as one neighbourhood, the bloodstream another, and the gills yet another. Each environment offers different resources and conditions. Temperature, oxygen levels, and nutrient availability vary throughout the body. Parasites and symbiotic organisms evolve to match the conditions of the specific habitat they occupy. One species may specialize in attaching to intestinal walls where nutrients are abundant. Another may adapt to the flowing environment of gills, where oxygen levels remain high. A third may inhabit muscle tissue where it can remain hidden from the host's immune system. These adaptations allow the invisible neighborhoods within hosts to become surprisingly complex. Scientists sometimes discover multiple parasite species living inside the same host without interfering with one another. The parasites divide the available space just as animals in a forest divide trees, soil, and airspace. Because each species uses a slightly different resource, they can coexist without direct competition. These layered communities also demonstrate how interconnected marine life can be. Parasites and symbiotic organisms often move between hosts during different stages of their life cycles. A microscopic larva drifting through plankton may enter a small crustacean first. When a fish eats that crustacean, the parasite transfers to the fish's body. Later, a larger predator may eat the fish, allowing the parasite to reach its final host. At each stage, the parasite becomes part of a different host's internal neighbourhood. The host itself may carry several other residents simultaneously. Through these movements, parasites link multiple species together in ways that are rarely visible from the outside. This hidden movement of organisms contributes to the flow of energy through marine ecosystems. When parasites draw nutrients from a host, they convert those nutrients into their own growth and reproduction. When they move into new hosts through predation, the energy continues flowing through the food web. Even though parasites are small, their influence on energy transfer can be significant. Another interesting feature of these invisible neighbourhoods involves population size. Hosts rarely contain only a single parasite species. Instead, they often carry small populations of multiple organisms. A fish might contain several worms in its digestive system, dozens of bacteria species in its gut, and a few crustaceans attached to its gills. Each group occupies its own region inside the host. These communities can change over time. As the host grows older, it encounters new environments and new sources of food. Each encounter increases the chance of acquiring new residents. Young fish may begin life with relatively simple internal communities. Over time, as they feed and interact with other animals, their internal ecosystems become more diverse. By adulthood, a host may carry a wide variety of organisms. Some of those organisms remain only temporarily, while others persist for the host's entire lifespan. Marine researchers often compare this process to ecological succession. Just as a forest develops gradually over decades, internal communities within hosts may grow more complex as the host ages. Early residents create conditions that influence which species can arrive later. Beneficial bacteria may stabilize the digestive environment. Parasites that occupy certain tissues may prevent other species from settling in the same location. These interactions shape the structure of the internal neighbourhood. Another factor influencing these communities is the host's immune system. Immune defences act like a regulatory system controlling which organisms can remain inside the body. Parasites and microbes that successfully evade these defences become long-term residents. Others are removed quickly. The immune system, therefore, helps determine the composition of the internal ecosystem. It maintains a balance between allowing certain organisms to remain and preventing others from multiplying too rapidly. In healthy hosts, this balance keeps the internal neighbourhood stable. The host remains strong enough to survive, while its internal residents continue their life cycles. Researchers studying deep-sea animals sometimes encounter particularly crowded hosts. Large fish or marine mammals may carry dozens of parasite species at once. Some are microscopic, others are large enough to see easily during dissection. Each species occupies a distinct location inside the host's body. Despite their presence, the host often continues functioning normally. This stability illustrates how evolution favours balanced relationships. Parasites that destroy their hosts quickly tend to disappear because their environments vanish. Parasites that maintain moderate populations can persist for generations. The result is a long-term coexistence between host and residents. From the outside, these invisible neighbourhoods remain hidden. A fish swimming through the ocean appears to be a single organism moving through water. Inside, however, it carries a complex biological community. Each member of that community interacts with the host and with other residents. Together they form a small ecosystem travelling through the sea. This perspective changes how scientists understand marine life. Instead of focusing only on visible animals, researchers now examine the internal communities that accompany them. These hidden ecosystems influence host health, reproduction, and survival. They also connect species across food webs through the movement of parasites between hosts. The ocean is therefore filled not only with fish, jellyfish, crustaceans, and worms. It is filled with neighbourhoods of life nested inside those animals. Each host becomes a habitat supporting smaller organisms that share space within its body. The deeper scientists explore these relationships, the more they realise that many animals in the ocean function less like isolated individuals and more like moving ecosystems. And within these ecosystems, evolution continues shaping new strategies for survival, including life cycles that move through several hosts before reaching completion. When scientists look at the many creatures that spend their lives inside other animals, one question naturally appears sooner or later. How did these lifestyles begin in the first place? Living inside another organism might seem like an unusual strategy, yet it has evolved many times in many different groups of animals. Worms, crustaceans, protozoans, and even some fish have developed ways to use other animals as habitats. These species are not closely related to one another, yet they arrived at similar solutions for survival. That pattern suggests something important. The ocean repeatedly creates conditions where living inside another creature becomes an effective way to survive. To understand how this happens, it helps to imagine the earlier stages of such a relationship. In the beginning, the organisms involved were probably not parasites or internal residents at all. They were free-living creatures moving through the ocean like any other animal. Some may have lived on the seafloor, feeding on small particles drifting through the water. Others may have been planktonic organisms drifting through currents. At some point, one of these organisms encountered a larger animal and discovered that the animal's body offered certain advantages. Perhaps the small creature found shelter beneath the host's shell or skin. Perhaps it followed the host to feed on scraps of food that the host left behind. At this stage, the relationship might have been temporary and harmless. The smaller organism benefited from the host's presence without actually entering the body. This kind of association is known as commensalism, and it still occurs widely in the ocean today. Small animals often follow larger ones in order to feed on leftover food or find protection from predators. Over time, however, some of these associations become closer. A small organism that spends enough time near a host may eventually find opportunities to enter parts of the host's body. A worm that feeds near a fish's mouth might occasionally slip inside the digestive tract. A crustacean living near gills may begin attaching itself more firmly in order to feed on blood or tissue. If these early intrusions allow the organism to survive and reproduce more effectively, natural selection begins favouring traits that make the behaviour easier. The organism might evolve hooks that allow it to attach securely to tissues. Its body might become smaller or more flexible, allowing it to move through narrow spaces inside the host. Generation after generation, the organism becomes better adapted to living inside another creature. Eventually, the free-living stage may disappear entirely. the species becomes a parasite or internal symbiont. This process does not happen quickly. It unfolds over long periods of evolutionary time. Each small change that improves survival is passed to the next generation. Slowly, the organism's anatomy and behaviour shift toward a life that depends on the host. Some parasites lose structures that are no longer necessary. A worm that lives inside a host's digestive tract may no longer need strong muscles for movement through open water. Its body becomes simpler and more specialised. Digestive organs may shrink if the parasite absorbs nutrients directly from the host's tissues. Eyes may disappear because darkness inside the host makes vision unnecessary. At the same time, other structures become more elaborate. Hooks, suckers, or anchoring structures evolve to help the parasite remain attached to internal tissues. Reproductive organs may grow larger because producing many offspring increases the chances that some larvae will find new hosts. In extreme cases, the parasite becomes almost unrecognizable compared to its free-living relatives. Parasitic barnacles provide one of the most striking examples. Their ancestors were typical crustaceans with legs, shells, and the ability to move freely. Modern parasitic barnacles that infect crabs have bodies that resemble little sacs attached to their hosts. Most of the structures that once allowed them to live independently have disappeared. Their entire existence revolves around drawing nutrients from the host and producing offspring. Evolution has reshaped them completely. The same pattern appears in parasitic worms. Many species have bodies devoted largely to reproduction. They produce enormous numbers of eggs that drift into the ocean and search for new hosts. The success of this strategy lies in numbers. Even if most larvae never find a host, a few will succeed. Those few continue the species. Another important factor driving the evolution of parasitism is energy efficiency. Finding food in the ocean can be difficult. Small animals must spend energy searching for prey while avoiding predators. Inside a host, however, food often arrives automatically. The host eats, digests, and circulates nutrients through its body. A parasite living in that environment can absorb those nutrients with far less effort. From an evolutionary perspective, this represents a highly efficient way to obtain energy. The parasite invests its resources not in searching for food, but in reproduction and survival within the host. The host becomes a stable environment that provides shelter, movement, and nutrition. This stability makes internal living particularly attractive in environments where resources are unpredictable. The deep sea, for example, often contains limited food. Animals living there may benefit greatly from using other organisms as habitats. Yet the evolution of living inside another creature is not entirely one-sided. Hosts also evolve in response to parasites. When parasites become common, hosts develop defenses to limit the damage they cause. Immune systems evolve to detect foreign organisms. Tissues may become tougher or more resistant to invasion. Some animals develop behaviours that reduce exposure to parasites. Fish may seek cleaning stations where smaller fish remove parasites from their bodies. Other species migrate to different environments during certain seasons, reducing contact with parasites that thrive in particular habitats. These host defences create pressure on parasites to adapt further. Parasites evolve ways to hide from the immune system. Some mimic the host's own molecules, making them difficult for immune cells to recognise. Others occupy parts of the body where immune responses are weaker. The result is an ongoing evolutionary interaction between host and parasite. Each side changes in response to the other. This process, sometimes called coevolution, shapes the characteristics of both species. Parasites become better at surviving inside hosts. Hosts become better at limiting the damage parasites cause. Neither side completely wins. Instead, a balance emerges that allows both organisms to persist. Over millions of years, this balance produces the remarkable diversity of parasitic lifestyles found in the ocean today. Some parasites spend their entire lives inside a single host. Others move through several hosts during different stages of their life cycles. Some are microscopic, while others grow large enough to be seen easily. Despite these differences, they share a common origin. Each began as a free-living organism that gradually adapted to life within another creature. The ocean's immense biodiversity provides many opportunities for such transitions. Animals constantly interact with one another through feeding, shelter, and movement. Any interaction that offers a survival advantage can become the starting point for a new evolutionary path. Living inside another animal is simply one of the many solutions that evolution has produced. And once a species becomes specialized for this lifestyle, it often develops life cycles that are even more complex. Some parasites do not remain within a single host. Instead, they travel through several hosts during their lives, moving step by step through the ocean's food web. In the ocean, many parasites do not spend their entire lives inside a single host. Instead, their existence unfolds through a series of stages that move from one animal to another. Each stage is carefully matched to a different environment and a different host species. When scientists first began mapping these life cycles, the results often seemed almost unbelievable. A single parasite might begin life inside a microscopic crustacean, continue its development inside a fish, and finally mature inside a much larger predator. From the parasite's perspective, the ocean is not simply a place where hosts exist. It is a pathway connecting those hosts. Each stage of the life cycle depends on the natural feeding habits of marine animals. Predators eat prey, larger fish consume smaller fish, and parasites quietly ride along through the chain of consumption. The entire system operates without any deliberate planning. It is simply the result of evolution shaping organisms that survive best when they follow these pathways. To understand how this works, it helps to begin at the earlier stage of the parasite's life. Many marine parasites start as eggs, or microscopic larvae released into the water by an adult living inside a host. These larvae drift through the plankton along with countless other tiny organisms. At this stage, they are extremely vulnerable. They cannot hunt for food in the usual sense. Their survival depends on encountering the right host before their energy reserves are exhausted. The ocean is vast, so parasites solve this problem by producing enormous numbers of offspring. A single adult parasite may release thousands or even millions of eggs. Most of those larvae will never find a host, but the few that do succeed will continue the cycle. One common pattern begins with a small crustacean such as a copepod. These tiny animals feed on plankton and are themselves eaten by fish. A parasite larva drifting through the water may be swallowed by a copepod while the crustacean is feeding. Inside the copepod's digestive system, the parasite survives and begins its first stage of development. The copepod continues swimming through the water, unaware that it now carries an internal passenger. Sooner or later, a fish eats the copepod. When this happens, the parasite transfers into the fish's body. Inside the fish, the parasite continues growing. It may move into the digestive tract, muscle tissue, or body cavity depending on its species. At this stage, the fish becomes an intermediate host. The parasite cannot yet reproduce, but it prepares for the next step of its life cycle. That step usually involves a predator. If a larger fish, marine mammal or seabird eats the infected fish, the parasite enters its final host. Inside this new environment, the parasite reaches maturity. Its reproductive organs develop fully, and it begins producing eggs that are eventually released back into the ocean. From there, the cycle begins again. These multi-host life cycles might seem complicated, but they offer important advantages. Each host provides a specific environment suited to a particular stage of development. The small crustacean offers an entry point into the food web. The fish provides a larger environment where the parasite can grow. The final predator allows the parasite to reproduce and release eggs into the ocean. By moving through several hosts, the parasite gains access to resources that would not be available in a single environment. This strategy also helps parasites spread across wide areas of the ocean. Predators travel long distances while searching for food. A parasite carried inside one of these animals may eventually release its eggs far from the place where it began life. Currents then distribute those eggs across even larger regions. In this way, parasites expand their range through the movement of their hosts. Some marine parasites follow life cycles even more complex than this three-host pattern. Certain species require 4 or more different hosts before reaching adulthood. Each stage of development takes place in a different organism, and each transition depends on one host being eaten by another. At first glance, such an arrangement might seem fragile. What if the infected fish is never eaten by the right predator? What if the parasite ends up inside an animal that cannot support its next stage? These possibilities do occur. Many parasites fail to complete their life cycles, but again, numbers provide the solution. By producing vast numbers of larvae, parasites increase the chances that some individuals will successfully navigate the sequence of hosts. Those successful individuals pass their genes to the next generation. Over time, natural selection refines the life cycle. Parasites evolve ways to increase the probability of reaching the correct host. Some species influence the behavior of intermediate hosts in subtle ways. Infected animals may swim closer to the surface or react more slowly to predators. These changes make them more likely to be eaten by the predator that serves as the parasite's next host. The parasite does not consciously control its host. Instead, its presence alters chemical signals or physical conditions within the host's body. These changes affect behavior in ways that improve the parasite's chances of completing its life cycle. Another fascinating aspect of these complex life cycles involves the transformation of the parasite's body at each stage. The form that exists inside a copepod may look very different from the form that lives inside a fish. Later, the adult parasite inside a marine mammal may differ again. Each stage is adapted to the environment of its specific host. Structures used for movement in one stage may disappear in the next. Reproductive organs may develop only when the parasite reaches its final host. These transformations allow the parasite to perform different functions during different parts of its life. In some species, the early larval stage possesses structures that help it swim freely through plankton. Once inside a host, those structures are no longer necessary. The parasite shifts its energy toward growth and reproduction instead. These dramatic changes make the life cycle seem almost like a series of separate organisms connected by a single genetic identity. Scientists studying these parasites often compare their development to the metamorphosis of insects. A caterpillar, a chrysalis, and a butterfly look completely different, yet they represent stages of the same species. Similarly, a parasite's larva, intermediate stage, and adult form may appear unrelated at first glance. Only careful study reveals that they are part of the same life cycle. The ocean provides ideal conditions for such strategies. Marine food webs are rich with predator-prey interactions. Small animals are constantly eaten by larger ones. Parasites take advantage of these interactions to move through different hosts. Each act of predation becomes an opportunity for the parasite to reach its next environment. In this way, parasites weave themselves into the structure of the ecosystem. They travel along the same pathways that energy and nutrients follow through the food web. Fish eat crustaceans. Larger fish eat smaller fish. Marine mammals and seabirds eat fish. Parasites accompany these movements, transferring from host to host along the way. By studying these life cycles, scientists gain insight into how interconnected marine ecosystems really are. A parasite linking several species together reveals hidden relationships between those species. It shows how energy moves through the system and how different animals depend on one another. Even though parasites are often small and hidden from view, their life cycles reflect the broader structure of the ocean's biological networks. And while some parasites travel through multiple hosts before reaching adulthood, others succeed through a different strategy. They find a host that offers such strong protection and resources that living inside it becomes the safest place in the entire ocean. For many organisms living in the ocean, survival depends on movement, speed, and constant awareness. Fish must swim quickly enough to avoid predators. Small crustaceans must remain alert to changes in currents and shadows. Even creatures drifting with the plankton rely on numbers and luck to make it through each day. Yet for some species, evolution has produced a very different solution. Instead of avoiding danger through speed or camouflage, these organisms have adopted a strategy that might be described as one of the ocean's most elaborate survival methods. They live inside another animal. When a parasite or symbiotic organism successfully settles within a host, the rules of survival change dramatically. The open ocean is full of predators, unpredictable currents, and competition for food. Inside a host, many of those challenges disappear. The host provides shelter, movement, and a steady supply of nutrients. From the perspective of the internal resident, it can be one of the safest environments available in the entire ocean. This strategy has evolved many times because it solves several problems at once. Finding food in the ocean can be difficult. Small animals must constantly search for prey while avoiding becoming prey themselves. Inside a host, however, nutrients often flow continuously. The host eats, digests, and circulates nutrients through its body. Parasites positioned in the digestive tract, bloodstream or tissues can absorb these nutrients directly. Instead of hunting or grazing, they collect energy from the host's biological processes. Shelter is another advantage. Predators rarely attempt to tear open another animal simply to reach a small parasite hidden inside. The host's body acts as a barrier that protects the internal resident from most external threats. Even in environments where predators are abundant, a parasite living inside a host may remain completely safe. The host also moves. Fish swim through vast stretches of water in search of food. Marine mammals migrate across entire ocean basins. Even slow-moving animals like sea cucumbers crawl across the seafloor over time. For an organism living inside such a host, this movement provides transportation without effort. The internal resident travels wherever the host goes. This movement can help the parasite reach new feeding grounds or eventually encounter the next host in its life cycle. Temperature stability also plays a role. Many parts of the ocean experience changes in temperature as currents shift or seasons change. Inside a host, conditions remain more stable. Body heat, metabolic activity, and circulating fluids create an environment that changes more slowly than the surrounding water. For small organisms sensitive to environmental changes, this stability can greatly improve survival. These advantages help explain why so many different species have evolved to live inside other animals. But this lifestyle is not without challenges. Entering a host is only the first step. Once inside, the parasite must avoid being removed by the host's immune system. Hosts possess complex defenses designed to detect foreign organisms and eliminate them. Parasites that fail to evade these defenses are quickly destroyed. To survive, internal residents evolve a variety of strategies. Some coat their bodies with molecules that resemble the host's own tissues. This disguise helps them avoid detection by immune cells. Others hide in locations where immune responses are weaker, such as the digestive tract or certain internal cavities. Some release chemicals that suppress inflammation or immune reactions around their bodies. These adaptations allow the parasite to remain inside the host without triggering a strong defensive response. Another challenge involves maintaining balance with the host. If a parasite consumes too many resources or damages vital organs, the host may weaken or die. For the parasite, this outcome is usually unfavourable. A dead host cannot provide nutrients or shelter. Natural selection therefore favours parasites that draw resources gradually rather than aggressively. The most successful parasites are those that can coexist with their hosts for long periods. In many cases, hosts carrying parasites continue living normal lives. They feed, grow, reproduce and migrate through the ocean just as uninfected animals do. The parasite remains quietly inside, collecting nutrients and preparing for reproduction. Over millions of years, this balance has shaped some of the most specialized organisms in the marine world. Certain parasites spend nearly their entire lives inside a host, emerging only briefly to release offspring into the water. Others move through several hosts during different stages of development. Each stage is adapted to a specific environment within a particular species. These complex life cycles illustrate just how effective internal living can be as a survival strategy. The host becomes a stable habitat that supports growth and reproduction. Predators become opportunities rather than threats if they help the parasite reach its next host. Food arrives automatically through the host's own feeding behaviour. The parasite's body gradually evolves to take advantage of these conditions. Structures used for independent living may disappear. Parasites that absorb nutrients directly through their skin no longer require complex digestive systems. Eyes may become unnecessary in dark internal environments. Limbs used for swimming may shrink or vanish entirely. Energy that would have supported these structures is redirected toward reproduction. Many parasitic species produce vast numbers of eggs or larvae. Although most offspring will never find a suitable host, the few that succeed ensure the continuation of the species. From an evolutionary perspective, this strategy has proven remarkably successful. Parasites represent a significant portion of biodiversity in the ocean. For every visible animal swimming through the water, there may be several smaller organisms living inside it. These hidden residents form an entire layer of life that often goes unnoticed. Yet their influence extends throughout marine ecosystems. Parasites help regulate host populations by reducing reproduction or growth in certain individuals. They connect species through their complex life cycles, linking crustaceans, fish, marine mammals, and seabirds in a network of biological interactions. Energy flows through these networks as parasites move from host to host. Hosts themselves become habitats that support internal communities of organisms. The ocean within the ocean continues expanding with every discovery scientists make. New species of parasites and symbiotic partners are identified regularly as researchers explore deeper regions of the sea. Advanced genetic tools reveal microbial communities inside hosts that were invisible to earlier generations of scientists. Each new finding reinforces the same idea. Living inside another creature is not a rare curiosity. It is one of the most elaborate and widespread survival strategies in the natural world. The host provides a moving environment filled with resources. The parasite evolves to use those resources efficiently. Together they form a relationship shaped by millions of years of adaptation. Yet beyond the biological details lies a broader lesson about the structure of life in the ocean. Animals that appear independent often carry hidden ecosystems within them. Hosts support entire communities of organisms that influence their health, behaviour, and interactions with other species. Understanding these relationships helps scientists see the ocean in a new way. Instead of a collection of isolated creatures, the ocean becomes a network of living environments connected through countless interactions. And as researchers continue studying these connections, they begin to recognize that the smallest organisms living inside hosts can reveal something profound about how life organizes itself across the planet. When people first hear about creatures that live inside other creatures, the reaction is often surprise. The idea seems unusual, sometimes unsettling, and occasionally difficult to imagine in everyday terms. A worm living inside a fish or a crustacean replacing a tongue sounds like something invented for fiction, rather than a normal part of nature. Yet the deeper scientists explore the ocean, the clearer it becomes that these relationships are not rare accidents. They're widespread, deeply rooted in evolutionary history, and surprisingly important for understanding how life works. These hidden creatures reveal something fundamental about living systems. Life rarely exists in isolation. Instead, organisms interact with one another constantly, sharing space, energy, and biological functions in ways that are often invisible from the outside. When we first observe an animal, we usually see a single organism moving through its environment. A fish swims through dark water. A sea cucumber crawls slowly across the ocean floor. A jellyfish drifts upward with gentle pulses of its bell. But inside many of these animals exists a small community of other organisms. Parasites draw nutrients, bacteria assist digestion. Symbiotic partners clean tissues or defend against harmful microbes. Together they form an internal ecosystem that travels wherever the host goes. From a biological perspective, this challenges the simple idea of what an individual organism really is. Instead of being a single independent creature, a host often functions as a host environment supporting multiple forms of life at once. This concept has become increasingly important in modern biology. Researchers studying microbial communities inside animals have discovered that many organisms depend heavily on the microorganisms living within them. Digestive bacteria break down food that the host cannot process alone. Other microbes produce vitamins or regulate immune responses. In some cases, removing these microbial partners can seriously affect the host's health. The host and its internal residents form a combined biological system. Neither can function exactly the same way without the other. This realization has led scientists to rethink the boundaries between organisms and ecosystems. A forest is clearly an ecosystem filled with interacting species. But the same principle applies inside living bodies. The digestive tract of a fish, the body cavity of a sea cucumber, or the mouth of a host fish carrying a tongue-replacing parasite all become environments where multiple species interact. The difference is that these ecosystems travel through the ocean inside another animal. Understanding these relationships also reveals how adaptable life can be. Evolution has produced organisms capable of surviving in places that might seem impossible at first. Some live in deep ocean trenches under enormous pressure. Others thrive near hydrothermal vents where temperatures fluctuate dramatically. And some have evolved to live inside the tissues, organs, or body cavities of other animals. Each of these environments presents unique challenges. Inside a host, an organism must avoid immune defenses, adapt to limited space, and find ways to obtain nutrients without destroying the environment that sustains it. The solutions evolution has produced are often remarkably precise. Parasites develop hooks or suction structures to anchor themselves in tissues. Microscopic organisms coat their surfaces with molecules that resemble the host's cells, allowing them to avoid detection. Symbiotic bacteria produce enzymes that unlock nutrients from difficult food sources. Each adaptation reflects countless generations of natural selection, refining the relationship between host and resident. These relationships also show how connected species are within ecosystems. Parasites moving between hosts link different animals through their life cycles. A parasite may begin inside a small crustacean, continue its development inside a fish, and finally reproduce inside a marine mammal or seabird. Each host becomes a temporary habitat along the parasite's journey. Through this process, parasites connect multiple levels of the food web. Energy flows from one host to another as parasites move through predator-prey relationships. Although these organisms are small, their influence on ecosystems can be significant. By affecting host behavior or reproduction, parasites can influence population sizes and interactions between species. For example, parasites that reduce reproduction in certain hosts may prevent those hosts from becoming too abundant. This allows other species to maintain stable populations as well. In this way, parasites contribute to the balance of marine ecosystems. Symbiotic partners also shape ecosystems in important ways. Bacteria living inside hosts help process nutrients that might otherwise remain unused. Those nutrients then support the growth of larger organisms that feed on the hosts. Energy moves through ecosystems more efficiently because these internal partnerships exist. When scientists study marine ecosystems today, they increasingly consider these hidden interactions. The health of a fish population may depend not only on food availability and predators, but also on the microscopic communities living inside the fish. Changes in water temperature, pollution, or habitat conditions can disrupt these internal communities. When that happens, the host's health may suffer. By examining parasites and symbiotic organisms, researchers gain insights into environmental changes affecting marine life. Certain parasites appear only in specific environmental conditions. Their presence or absence can reveal information about water quality, temperature shifts, or changes in host populations. In this way, the smallest residents inside marine animals can serve as indicators of larger ecological patterns. Studying them helps scientists understand how ecosystems respond to natural and human influences. Another important lesson emerges from these relationships. Life does not always follow simple categories such as predator and prey. Some organisms cooperate closely, sharing resources and supporting each other's survival. Others compete for space and nutrients within the same host. Still others exist somewhere in between, drawing benefits from hosts without causing significant harm. The ocean contains an entire spectrum of relationships between species. Parasites, commensal organisms, and mutualistic partners all exist within this spectrum. Each interaction represents a solution shaped by evolutionary pressures. Together they demonstrate how flexible life can be when adapting to new environments. The bodies of marine animals become environments themselves. Hosts become moving habitats supporting communities of smaller organisms. Each resident contributes to the complex web of biological interactions that define the ocean. From a distance, a fish swimming through dark water may appear alone. But inside that fish, another world exists. Microscopic bacteria digest food. Parasites move through tissues. Small tenants share space in gills or body cavities. The ocean within the ocean continues quietly inside living creatures, and as scientists keep exploring these hidden worlds, they are reminded that life on Earth rarely exists in isolation. Every organism is connected to others in ways that shape survival, evolution, and the structure of ecosystems. Understanding these connections reveals how intricate and interconnected life truly is, especially in the vast and often mysterious environment beneath the waves. And so, after drifting through all of these strange and hidden relationships, we return once more to the quiet surface of the ocean. From above, the sea still looks much as it always has, a vast stretch of water moving slowly beneath the sky. Waves roll gently toward distant shores. The horizon forms a calm line where water and sky meet. Nothing about that view suggests the unusual stories unfolding beneath the surface. And yet somewhere far below, fish are swimming through dark water carrying entire communities inside their bodies. Sea cucumbers crawl slowly across the seafloor while small fish rest inside them. Jellyfish drift through currents with tiny companions sheltered among their tentacles. Inside the mouth of a fish, a small crustacean quietly occupies the place where a tongue once existed. Worms coil within tissues. Bacteria help digest food. Parasites move from host to host as predators hunt their prey. All of it happening quietly, continuously, and mostly unseen. The ocean is full of these hidden lives. When we first look at a marine animal, it is easy to imagine that we are seeing the whole story. A fish is simply a fish. A crab is simply a crab. And the creature moves through its environment as a single individual. But biology rarely works that way. Inside many animals exists another layer of life, one that operates on a smaller scale, but plays a powerful role in shaping how organisms survive. Hosts become habitats, bodies become ecosystems. What appears to be a single animal may actually support a neighbourhood of organisms living within its tissues, organs, and internal spaces. Some of these residents are helpful partners, others are quiet passengers. A few are parasites that draw energy from the host's body. Each relationship reflects millions of years of evolution, shaping ways for organisms to survive in the ocean. For the host, life continues much as it always has. Fish still hunt for food. Jellyfish still pulse slowly through the water. Sea cucumbers still feed on sediment drifting across the seafloor. Inside them, however, other lives unfold. Microscopic communities digest food, regulate chemical balance, and defend against disease. Parasites grow slowly while waiting for the next stage of their life cycle. Small tenants hide in sheltered spaces protected from the dangers of open water. Together, they form the ocean within the ocean. Understanding these hidden relationships changes how we see marine life. The ocean is not simply a collection of individual animals swimming through water. It is a network of living systems connected in ways that are often invisible. A fish may serve as food for a predator, but it may also serve as a habitat for worms and bacteria. Those organisms may move into other hosts later, linking species together across the food web. Energy flows not only through visible predators and prey, but also through parasites and symbiotic partners travelling quietly between them. Every host carries part of this hidden network within its body. In many ways, the ocean resembles a layered world. There is the surface layer where sunlight reaches and waves roll gently across the water. Below that lies the darker realm where deep-sea creatures move slowly through cold currents. And within those creatures exists another layer still, one filled with organisms too small to see without careful observation. Each layer supports the others. The visible ocean and the invisible ocean operate together as a single system. Scientists exploring marine ecosystems continue to uncover new examples of these relationships. Advanced microscopes and genetic tools reveal microbial communities inside animals that earlier generations of researchers could not detect. Deep-sea expeditions bring back specimens carrying unfamiliar parasites or symbiotic partners. Every new discovery adds another piece to the picture. The more we learn about the ocean, the more complex and interconnected it becomes. Even the smallest creatures can influence the health and survival of much larger animals. Parasites shape population dynamics. Symbiotic bacteria support digestion and immunity. Tiny organisms living inside hosts can determine whether those hosts thrive or struggle in their environment. These hidden interactions remind us that life on Earth is rarely simple. Each organism exists within a network of relationships. Some of those relationships are obvious, like predator and prey. Others remain concealed inside living bodies, yet they're just as important for understanding how ecosystems function. The next time you imagine the ocean, perhaps picture not only the fish and whales swimming through open water, but also the quiet worlds contained within them. Picture the small organisms drifting through bloodstreams, resting inside body cavities, or assisting with digestion deep inside tissues. Picture the fish carrying worms that will eventually move into another host. Picture the bacteria quietly helping their hosts unlock energy from food. All of these lives unfolding simultaneously beneath the waves. And now, wherever you happen to be listening, a small moment has passed since we began this quiet exploration. Perhaps the room around you has grown a little darker. Maybe the sounds outside have softened as the evening settles in. The ocean, meanwhile, continues its steady rhythm far away. Fish still swim through dark water. Jellyfish still drift slowly through currents. And inside many of those animals, entire communities of hidden life continue their quiet existence. If this gentle journey through the unseen corners of marine life brought you a sense of calm curiosity, I would be grateful if you left a like and perhaps subscribed as well. It helps this quiet space reach others who might enjoy drifting through these slow explorations of the natural world. For now, though, there is nothing left to analyse or imagine too carefully. Just the quiet thought that somewhere beneath the waves, in the dark calm of the deep sea, countless small lives are unfolding inside others, each one part of a hidden network that has existed for millions of years. And while the ocean may seem vast and mysterious from the surface, its most unusual stories are often the ones taking place quietly within.